If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today, we are doing a logical analysis of the highly anticipated and much chastised so-called debate with flat earther David Weiss and so-called Professor Dave. This was on Sean Atwood Unleashed. He was the supposed moderator of this so-called debate, supposed to be formal debate. Now, Sean Atwood is a curious one. I actually don't really know what to make of him. I don't know if he's this well-meaning, good-hearted guy, and he's just got, he's not all there mentally, and that explains his idiosyncrasies and issues with logical processing. But, yeah, this is a rough one because, and we're actually going to be doing something. I haven't done this yet. I've been wanting to do this for a while. We're going to have logical fallacy counters to see who gets demolished and obliterated and absolutely humiliated in this debate. Now, trigger warning. For all of the goofs out there, the Dunning-Kruger goofs that keep commenting on all of these logical analyses, these logical analyses are not about conclusions. We are not even going to be discussing whether the flat earth theory is true or whether the heliocentric globe theory is true or false. Professor Dave might be accidentally correct about what he perceives to be the model of the universe that is true. He's on the heliocentric globe side. Or David Weiss might be correct for all the wrong reasons about why the flat earth theory is true, if the flat earth theory is true. Or if we're living in some kind of simulation and neither is true, whatever the case may be. This is not a podcast about the shape of the earth. This is a podcast analyzing logical argumentation. That is it. That is all. Are the flat earthers' arguments fallacious? Why or why not? Are the globe earthers' arguments logically fallacious? Why or why not? Which one of these goofs has a handle on the information being discussed? Who understands the scientific method? Who understands how controls work? This is what this logical analysis is for. If you do not comprehend that and you choose to continue commenting, I mean, that's perfectly fine. Dunning-Kruger examples are welcome on MINDSHOCK. Feel free to embarrass yourself proving you didn't understand anything presented in the comment section. There's no issue with that. But anybody who wants to have an actual meaningful dialogue about any of this stuff, make sure you understand that point. And if you're one of these goofs who's just that mentally deficient, don't be afraid to invest in a tutor. It could be the best money you ever spent. If your ego doesn't have you on such short strings that you can actually examine the possibility that maybe you don't understand plain English or the basics of science or logic, even on a children's level, it might be a good investment. So, we will get started here. As always, if you find the MINDSHOCK podcast interesting, informative, entertaining, and you want to help bring logic and reason back to a world where it is quickly becoming extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description and help us get more mind-shocking content out there. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share the podcast. Let's spread logic and reason to the world and expose these Dunning-Kruger goofs peddling propaganda. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. If you want to debate me, that's perfectly fine. If you have all your logical fallacies locked down and have a very good understanding of them, we could do that as well. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Now, just to reiterate one more time, because there really are that many Dunning-Kruger groups out there, I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. I am not alleging the flat earth theory is true or untrue. I am not alleging the heliocentric globe theory is true or untrue. We are just examining logical argumentation and who the silly goofs are. So let's get started. So let's lay the foundation here for people who are new to logic, because I know a lot of people just haven't even heard of what logic is. I mean, there's even goofs out there that make fun of people that bring up logical fallacies, as if not having a valid argument based in reality is a good thing, because you don't want to deal in fallacies, because that'll expose the clueless goof. I mean, it's kind of hilarious how many people out there just don't want to even address logical fallacies. So let's just go straight to the dictionary. Webster's definition of logic: a science that deals with the principles and criteria of validity. The science of the formal principles of reasoning, branch or variety of logic. Formal principles of a branch of knowledge, a particular mode of reasoning. Okay. So basically, if you are concerned with validity, what is valid, what is not valid, for people who don't know the definition of valid, let's go to Webster's again. So it's either legal efficacy or force, or well-grounded or justifiable, being relevant and meaningful, logically correct, or appropriate to the end in view, okay? So this is just dealing with reality, what's valid or what's not valid. So if you're bringing up faulty logic, or just hallucinations, or blind faith, obviously that's not valid. Just like someone citing to the Bible to try to prove God, or citing to a priest at a church, because other individuals don't necessarily even believe in that religion, but even if they do, those are not valid modes of reasoning. For appeal to authority, obviously all of these things, which I will actually give a quick rundown of logical fallacies right now. So logical fallacies are basically errors in reasoning. The formal definition here, Webster: a fallacy, a false or mistaken idea, erroneous character. So errors or falsities. Okay, so these do need to be exposed, because if anyone is concerned with the truth, particularly if you're dealing in science or physics or anything that's observable reality, observable, testable, again, the scientific method, why would you allow false or mistaken ideas? So for the purpose of this debate, we will actually be having a fallacy counter to see if either one of these goofs gets completely obliterated in formal debate. I mean, people are welcome to give their predictions now. For those that have not seen this debate, is the flat earther Dave Weiss side, is Dave Weiss, the flat earther, going to get demolished and obliterated? Or is it going to be Professor Dave, who's not actually a professor, the globe earther, going to get demolished and wrecked completely? Let's see. So let's do a quick rundown of actual fallacies. So, of course, the straw man logical fallacy, one of the most popular. So basically a misrepresentation of someone's argument to make it easier to attack. By exaggerating, misrepresenting, or just completely fabricating someone's argument, it's much easier to present your own position as being reasonable, but this kind of dishonesty serves to undermine an honest, rational debate. So, this, of course, is one of the most popular ones. False cause fallacy. I mean, this is a really popular one. A presumption that a real or perceived relationship between things means that one is the cause of the other. Many people confuse correlation, things happening together or in sequence, for causation, that one thing actually causes the other to happen. Sometimes correlation is coincidental, or it may be attributable to a common cause. Now, I'm just going to say this right now just to preempt, though. For example, the people arguing that gravity is the cause of things falling, if it's actually electromagnetism, and it pulls the electromagnetic charge is 9.8 meters per second squared. The fact that something falls is not proof that a bigger object attracts a smaller object. I mean, and a lot of these fallacies are combinations of multiple fallacies. They're linked together. Red herrings, hasty generalizations. I mean, a lot of these get roped in together. So that's, I mean, to try to keep it simple. I don't know how I'm going to count if something is two fallacies in one. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll count that. We'll see how it goes. Again, this is my first time doing a counter for fallacies in a debate, but I'll probably do it from now on just so it can be more clear which side argues completely fallaciously and which side does not, regardless of what the real truth is. I think I'm gonna have to keep reiterating that just there's so many goofs out there that just get triggered at the very notion of examining arguments instead of conclusion. I mean, so many silly goofs out there. But yeah, the false cause, definitely an issue. Appeal to emotion, basically an attempted manipulated emotional response in place of a valid or compelling argument. These are, of course, stacked on top of logical fallacies. Appeals to emotion include appeals to fear, envy, hatred, pity, pride, and more. It's important to note that sometimes a logically coherent argument may inspire emotion or have an emotional aspect, but the problem and fallacy occurs when emotion is used instead of a logical argument, or to obscure the fact that no compelling rational reason exists for one's position. Everyone bar sociopaths is affected by emotion, and so appeals to emotion are a very common and effective argument tactic, but they're ultimately flawed, dishonest, and tend to make one's opponents justifiably emotional. For example, in the gun control debate, I mean, people randomly throw out, oh, you want school children to die. That's your justification. I mean, that's also a straw man, obviously, and an appeal to emotion. I mean, it's just, it's insane how that's used as an argument when, well, the other thing that's also kind of weird is if you look at the amount of governments that have killed their own citizens after confiscating their weapons, I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of people. Now, obviously, one life lost is too many when you're talking school children, or children, school-aged children, but millions and tens of millions of school-aged children were killed by governments after they confiscated weapons. So if you want to appeal to emotion, I mean, there's a much more accurate and apt appeal to emotion if you look at for the pro gun side, just based on the fact that the amount of school-aged children killed after governments restricted firearms for the populace. So again, appeal to emotion is very common in that debate as well. Or even in certain medical treatments. Oh, you want everybody to die. Never mind that there's no evidence that the treatment actually works, or the treatment, the proposed treatment might actually make everything worse and kill even more people. But obviously the goofs engaging in appeal to emotional logical fallacies, they're obviously not concerned with actual facts or statistics. Now, the fallacy is interesting. I don't know how, it's not brought up often enough, but basically the fallacy is a presumption that a claim has been poorly argued, that the claim itself must be wrong. So this is why I'm not dealing in conclusions, because if Flat Earth Dave here is correct about the Flat Earth model and he argues fallaciously, that doesn't mean he's wrong just because he's using fallacies, just like Professor Dave here. He might be a complete and utter clueless buffoon with a mental disability with zero valid arguments, but he might accidentally hold the correct position of a heliocentric globe. So the fallacy is also important to keep in mind. The slippery slope logical fallacy, so this is also, there could be overlap here with the false cause. But the slippery slope states that if A happens, then Z will eventually happen too, therefore A should not happen. The problem with this reasoning is that it avoids engaging with the issue at hand and instead shifts attention to extreme hypotheticals. Because no proof is presented to show that such extreme hypotheticals will in fact occur, this fallacy is the form of an appeal to emotion fallacy by leveraging fear. In effect, the argument at hand is unfairly tainted by unsubstantiated conjecture. So this is actually popular with the climate grifters. So there's, with over 50 years of failed predictions by so-called climate scientists, they're actually scientists and priests. I mean, they were predicting an ice age in the 70s. Even the head of NASA's GISS Jim Hansen, in 1988, he said that in 20 years, New York City's west side will be underwater. I mean, these goofs, their predictions are always wrong, and then they're trying to obviously do all these carbon taxes and line the pockets of the corrupt by appealing to emotion. Oh, our planet is going to be destroyed and we're all going to die. So, and obviously they're not, they interpret all the data to make it seem like there's actual warming. But again, if you look at the raw data, which is freely available on NOAA, you could see that there's actually 1 degree of cooling, and if you factor in a roughly 1 degree margin for error, because of course, there's no such thing as perfect technology and perfect measurements, I mean, there's basically been no difference. But if you look at even all of history, the amount of natural disasters and lives lost and property damage as a result of disasters, I mean, it's dropping so exponentially. It's just crazy. So obviously this slippery slope stacked on top of appeal to emotion, this is popular with the climate grift crowd. And again, that doesn't mean there's no actual climate change. Obviously the climate is always changing and there's always cycles. And the question is, does solar activity, does that control 99.999999999999999% of all climate on Earth? Therefore, any kind of carbon emission restriction, it would have no measurable effect. Now, if you're claiming it will have a measurable effect, obviously the burden of proof is on positive claims, and we'll get to the burden of shifting the burden of proof logical fallacy in a moment. So the burden of proof basically trying to say that the claim doesn't lie with the person making the claim, but someone else has to disprove it. Now, this is popular, of course, for the moon landing cultists, those who worship at the Church of NASA. They claim that you have to prove that the landing didn't happen, and that it's not suspicious that thousands of reels of telemetry data of supposedly the greatest accomplishment in the history of mankind just accidentally lost, that the moon rocks that actually are allowed to be tested turn out to be petrified wood from Arizona. I mean, but none of that is suspicious, and it's still up to the scientifically skeptical who don't believe in these churches and corrupt institutions. It's up to them to disprove the moon landing instead of extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. Because, of course, one is not called upon to prove a negative. If someone claims there's a flying spaghetti monster in the sky and we all have to pay taxes to it, otherwise it's going to cause all the volcanoes to erupt and kill the earth, we're not just going to take that on faith. They have to prove it. Now, maybe it really is there. If it's an invisible interdimensional spaghetti monster, it might be there. I'm not saying it's not there. It's just there's no reason for someone to believe it unless the burden of proof is met. So burden of proof, of course, lies with someone making the claim, not upon anyone else to disprove. The inability or disinclination to disprove a claim does not render that claim invalid, nor does it give it credence whatsoever. However, it is important to note that we can never be certain of anything, so we must assign value to any claim based on available evidence, and to dismiss something on the basis that it hasn't been proven beyond all doubt is also fallacious reasoning. Again, that's why on MINDSHOCK, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. Now, obviously, the goofs hallucinate and strawman that I do, but obviously I don't. I say that explicitly. So, with Russell's teapot, Bertrand declares that a teapot at this very moment in orbit around the sun and between the Earth and Mars, and because no one can prove him wrong, his claim is therefore a valid one. But if he's claiming that, he must prove that. That's the whole point. And this is one of the fundamental fallacies, along with strawmanning and appeal to authority, that the gullible goofs who just believe everything they see on the idiot box. Now, Professor Dave here, I mean, I'm going to guess that he's going to have a whole lot of burden of proof fallacies, because he's hallucinating and pretending everybody should take on faith that all of these theories that he's purporting without supplying the evidence. Because if the theory is true, he should be able to clearly and succinctly prove why his house of cards is not a house of cards. Because if they're legitimate points and not a house of cards, because he's stacking theories upon theories, and then he's going to start name-calling, of course, which is an ad hominem logical fallacy, which also is one of the most popular fallacies. Ad hominem fallacy is basically an attack on the person. So you call them an idiot, you call them stupid, you can call them a liar. Even if those things are true, they have nothing to do with the argument, And so this fallacy, of course, instead of addressing the argument or position, it's an irrelevant attack on the person or an aspect of the person who is making the argument, or the attack can be made to a membership or group. For example, saying, well, you flat earthers are doing this, or you globe earthers are doing this. So this is also a this can be tied into a hasty generalization logical fallacy as well. And a hasty generalization fallacy, also called an overgeneralization fallacy, is making a claim based on evidence that is too small. For example, you say, oh, well, all conspiracy theorists are crazy. So, yeah, obviously a certain amount of conspiracy theorists are crazy, but a hasty generalization logical fallacy would basically be, it's also related to a compositional logical fallacy, parts to a whole. Again, like I said, a lot of these fallacies are interrelated. We're going to try to keep it as simple as possible, but this is MINDSHOCK, so I also want to be as accurate as possible. But, or saying like coincidence theorists are gullible goofs, or if you're a Church of NASA worshiper, you don't understand the scientific method. So obviously, a certain percentage of those goofs don't, but some of them might, and they're just either their cognitive dissonance or other issues, or they're just arguing dishonestly, would prevent them from addressing that. So hasty generalization, also a very common fallacy. So also somewhat related is the tu quo qui logical fallacy. So avoided engagement with criticism by turning the criticism back at the accuser. So basically answering criticism with criticism. So if someone points out an issue with a particular theory, the defender, instead of actually arguing that problem, they point out a problem on the other theory. So it doesn't defend their own position. They're just basically poking a hole in a completely separate theory. So this is also a relatively popular logical fallacy. It's also known as the U2 logical fallacy, or appeal to hypocrisy. It is commonly employed as an effective red herring because it takes the heat off someone having to defend their argument and instead shifts the focus back on the person making the criticism. I mean, this is a very cowardly debate tactic. If it's not, if the point has already been defended and the other person didn't understand it, then it can be effective, because if you've already made the defense of one particular model and the other person just didn't get it, either because of a mental deficiency or arguing dishonestly, then pointing out a similar issue might get the gears turning in their head or expose the hypocrisy. So it's not that they should never see. The thing is, these fallacies aren't fallacies unless they're used in place of an actual argument. So, for example, if one of these guys in this debate, either the flat earther or the globe earther, if they actually do address a point and argue effectively and then add on, "You're an idiot," it's not a logical fallacy, because it's not used in place of the argument. Like, for example, when I call people Dunning-Kruger goofs, I clearly outline their deficiency in their fallacy and all points relevant here. And the Dunning-Kruger goof is simply an objective observation of their mental capacity. I don't use that in place of any kind of argument. I know that's an issue. A lot of people have a hard time with it. But yeah, so if you're using it in addition to, unlike instead of, then it's technically not a logical fallacy. So a red herring logical fallacy, obviously also related to the tu quo qui logical fallacy, but the red herring fallacy is kind of a broader umbrella where someone presents irrelevant information in an attempt to distract others from the topic at hand in order to avoid a question or shift discussion in a new direction. So if, again, they're arguing dishonestly, or they just might be incompetent and they're just throwing it out emotionally, if they recognize there's a weak part of an argument, they don't want to draw attention to it or defend it because they know it's weak and it doesn't hold up. So they're going to throw out red herring logical fallacy. So, for example, a lot of this can be used in the context of history where someone makes some kind of claim about the current situation and then someone else throws out, oh yeah, well it was like twice as bad, however many years ago, 50 years ago. That has nothing to do, almost nothing to do with the specific problem at hand and the specific variables in this specific situation. They're bringing up something that might possibly fall under the same umbrella, like a particular difficulty or, a current issue, a current problem. So it's not directly relevant. So that would be a red herring, also relatively popular. So moving the goalpost logical fallacy, or known as special pleading, also sometimes is referred to as raising the bar, because it's a constant adjustment of the argument when the specific parameters were actually met. So it's basically demanding from an opponent that he or she address more and more points after the initial counter-argument has been satisfied, refusing to concede or accept the opponent's argument. So issue A has been raised, adequately answered. Issue B raised, adequately answered. Issue Z raised, adequately answered. So they just keep coming up with more and more scenarios in an attempt to disprove the previous scenarios, which have already been addressed and validly argued against. So you could also do this with the gun control debate. For example, a civilian population would never be able to defeat a government army. So then, because you can't fight against fighter jets. Well, then the counterpoint, of course, fighter jets can't go door to door. You can't fly. Not to mention the expensive costs. There's so many issues with using fighter jets against the civilian population, let's say a country the size of the United States, if that's where the argument is. Even if you have thousands of fighter jets just indiscriminately carpet bombing all the cities with infrastructures that the government would need, they wouldn't do that. So the F-15s go out of it. Then they start saying, oh, well, a civilian can't fight against a tank. Well, again, how many tanks do you have and how can they be maneuvered? Not to mention, obviously, without even getting into like foreign governments would, of course, take sides. So there'd be, looking at Ukraine again, there's so many foreign governments providing money and arms to the civilians. Whereas if the civilians were completely unarmed and there was no military defending Ukraine, they would have just been ridden clean over. Again, you could look at the example, then they say, okay, well, assault rifles, that's not going to do anything against a fighter jet. Well, obviously, but the fighting is not going to take place with the fighter jets. So, every step of these silly arguments, not to mention a portion of if there was some kind of war within the United States where the U.S. government turned against its citizenry, 100% of the U.S. military would not turn against the citizenry. There would be a rebellious faction, so they would have X amount of equipment. Not to mention, there are militias who do have tanks and some more advanced weapons and howitzers and all these things. I don't know about fighter jets. And then they would shift the goalposts again, saying, well, what about nuclear weapons? Well, now you could also address that, because are they going to nuke? If they're based in D.C. and New York and L.A., are they going to nuke their own bases? Obviously they wouldn't do that. Not to mention, are they again going to indiscriminately drop 50 million nukes all over every single countryside and just destroy the whole U.S. just to kill its own citizens? Obviously they want to have a country, so that argument doesn't work either. So then they'll just keep continuing to come up with scenarios, and even if you can address each scenario, they'll just keep coming up with more. So this kind of special pleading or moving the goalpost, it is also used by the anti-gun crowd. Another interesting write-up here on special pleading: humans are funny creatures and have a foolish aversion to being wrong. Rather than appreciate the benefits of being able to change one's mind through better understanding, many will invent ways to cling to old beliefs. One of the most common ways that people do this is to post-rationalize a reason why what they thought to be true must remain true. It's usually very easy to find a reason to believe something that suits us, and it requires integrity and genuine honesty with oneself to examine one's own beliefs and motivations without falling into the trap of justifying our existing ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. Next fallacy here, loaded question, the loaded question logical fallacy. You asked a question that has a presumption built into it, so that it couldn't be answered without appearing guilty. And this is also connected to a circular reasoning logical fallacy, which I'll get to in a moment. But the loaded question is particularly effective at derailing rational debates because of their inflammatory nature. The recipient of the loaded question is compelled to defend themselves and may appear flustered or on the back foot. So, a funny example listed here on pesec.no. Example, Grace and Helen were both romantically interested in Brad. One day, with Brad sitting within earshot, Grace asked in an inquisitive tone whether Helen was still having problems with her drug habit. That's an interesting example there. So here's the thing. That could also be built into a circular reasoning logical fallacy, because if there's no evidence that Helen even has a drug habit, and you see this kind of dishonesty all the time, so I will address that next with the circular reasoning logical fallacy. So circular reasoning, sometimes interchangeably used with begging the question. I mean, there are slight differences. Again, if for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to do a super quick overview here. So to beg the question is to assume what we are trying to prove, and the conclusion is stated or assumed in the premises. For example, God exists because the Bible says so. The Bible is true because it is the Word of God. So this kind of it's also kind of an appeal to faith in a way, because, for example, someone says, oh, well, NASA is the official space agency, and they said this, they went to the moon, therefore the astronauts went to the moon, they also said they went to the moon, they work for NASA, NASA wouldn't lie, therefore it's true. But if someone doesn't believe in NASA, similarly, someone doesn't believe in the Bible, you can't use the Bible to prove something is true just because it's in the Bible. That's why it's a circular reasoning logical fallacy. So this logically incoherent argument arises in situations where people have an assumption that is very ingrained. Therefore, taken in their minds as a given, circular reasoning is bad mostly because it's not very good. So, for example, if somebody is using gravity to prove something else, they can't comprehend that if gravity is an unproven theory, it's not mass attracting mass, but, for example, electromagnetism, they will never address that because they're either that mentally deficient or they're arguing dishonestly. So they'll say, well, how does gravity work on this? But if gravity is not working by mass attracting mass, then that question isn't valid to begin with. So obviously, this is also a very popular one. We're going to see it a lot. Another relatively popular one is anecdotal. Anecdotal logical fallacies are personal experiences or isolated examples instead of sound arguments or compelling evidence. Also, see, statistics, in order to have meaningful statistics, like, let's say you know somebody who got shot in the head point blank and survived, you can say, well, guns aren't that deadly. I know a guy who got shot in the head point blank and he survived. That's an anecdotal example. I mean, yeah, it might be true. Nobody's debating that, but that doesn't mean that 99% or more than 99% of the time somebody shot in the head with a gun is going to die, therefore guns are deadly. Even if you know two people that got shot in the head, or a couple people who were shot not in the head and they all survived, so you're saying, well, guns technically aren't that deadly because I know these couple of people that survived. That's, of course, an anecdotal logical fallacy. It's often much easier for people to believe someone's testimony as opposed to understanding complex data and variation across a continuum. Quantitative scientific measures are almost always more accurate than personal perceptions and experiences, but our inclination is to believe that which is tangible to us and or the word of someone we trust over a more abstract statistical reality. Also, of course, with you could use this example with other things like cigarettes or certain medical treatments where somebody might get the medical treatment and they don't die, therefore they declare the medical treatment safe. And of course, they could have gotten simply a saline solution instead of the actual medical treatment, and they wouldn't have known the difference because how would they know either way? And then they claim it is safe because them and their family and everybody they know got the specific medical treatment while ignoring all the people who died from side effects of the medical treatment. The middle ground logical fallacy, I mean, this one's not extremely popular, but you do see it kind of stating, oh, well, we do need certain types of medical treatments So therefore, these corrupt big pharmaceutical companies, they can't be completely useless. There's a place for them. We need a certain amount. But if technically all of their products do more harm than good, even if they're technically effective in certain ways, the damage they cost, there's no net benefit, it's always a deficit, then you don't need them. The truth is not always in the middle, and that's pretty much the middle ground logical fallacy. And people as children, a lot of times they hear, oh, well, the truth is in the middle. I mean, no. I mean, sometimes in personalized account and subjective perceptions of an event, sometimes people who are arguing dishonestly with their ego, they're going to try to make themselves look good. So in those select situations, the truth might be in the middle. But in general, scientifically, in terms of actual reality and data, the truth is not always in the middle. So the middle ground logical fallacy is basically that a compromise or a middle point between two extremes must be the truth. Obviously, not necessarily. Much of the time, the truth does indeed lie between two extreme points, but this can bias our thinking. Sometimes a thing is simply untrue, and a compromise of it is also untrue. Halfway between truth and a lie is still a lie. Another relatively popular logical fallacy is the cherry-picking logical fallacy, or the fallacy of incomplete evidence. When using only select evidence in order to persuade the audience to accept a position, and evidence that would go against the position is withheld. The stronger the withheld evidence, the more fallacious the argument. I'll bring up gun control again, because this is such an easy one to fall for fallacies, where basically all of the people say, oh, well, guns are dangerous. Look at all these people killed by guns, while ignoring, at least in the United States, the millions of lives saved by guns. So the millions of instances where criminals were repelled by the presence of a gun. So if you didn't have that presence, I mean, you could be looking at a lot more deadlier situations. So that's a really big critical data point that the anti-gun nuts always ignore, the amount of lives saved. So they hallucinate that by removing guns from law-abiding citizens, or making it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to get guns. Obviously, criminals don't follow law, so that wouldn't affect the criminals getting their guns on the black market or otherwise. So this kind of withheld evidence is so extreme, because not only do they hallucinate that lives would have been saved anyway, as if a crazed killer wouldn't use a handgun if they didn't have an AR. Obviously, handguns are primarily used to kill people in the United States, but also school-aged children. So they only look at mass shootings, and they ignore single incident shootings, which claim thousands and thousands of more lives than isolated mass shootings. Not that isolated mass shootings aren't horrible. Obviously they are. A single life lost is horrible. But having countless single life lost situations ignored to try to focus only on particular, as if the anti-gun nuts only seem to care about children killed in school or mass shootings, and they don't care about individual gun murders, like in these capitals, gun murder capitals like Baltimore and Chicago and all these cities where they have the most restrictive gun laws, which obviously only causes an increase in crime because only the criminals have the guns there, and they feel more comfortable to act with impunity because they know most of the population will be unarmed. Whereas if you look at countries where they have an armed populace and there's a lot of guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens, they statistically have the lowest gun homicide rates. And then you could also look at countries that have banned guns, and you can see their murder rates and criminal rates spike right after because the criminals are emboldened. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Criminals don't follow laws. I don't know why it's difficult to understand, but these cherry-picking logical fallacies are really popular in gun control debates as well. Another logical fallacy that's really popular by globe earthers and some flat earthers is the reification logical fallacy. This is a fallacy that does not get talked about, but it's really, really important. Reification is a logical fallacy that results from treating an abstraction as a concrete thing. It is associated with taking ideas too far until they become rigid and oppressive. A concrete thing is undeniable and measurable. Treating your abstract thoughts in the same way tends to be illogical. A commonly cited example of reification is the treatment of intelligence testing scores as if they were the concrete and universal definition of intelligence. Intelligence is an abstraction that is difficult to define and measure. So there's a couple different ways to do this. I mean, some people, again, this can be tied to appeal to authority, the appeal to authority logical fallacy, which I'll go over next, but basically saying, oh, well, the higher the degree, the smarter the person, and as if that's a concrete. Because obviously, indoctrinated goofs that jump through hoops like circus animals for treats like degrees, they actually are really good at regurgitation and submissively doing what their masters in the indoctrination facilities tell them to do in order to get their doctorate or masters. A lot of the time, they're Dunning-Kruger's off the charts because they assume and hallucinate that obedience is somehow related to intelligence while inside an indoctrination facility. Because if you look at throughout the past generations, I mean, the majority of everything that's taught in schools, aka indoctrination facilities, it's either wrong, it's either completely wrong or partially wrong. I mean, you could look at any subject other than English grammar and basic math. Everything else has been either completely or partially wrong or propagandized in some fashion. So they're learning all these theories. Look at the theories that were prevalent 100 years ago versus now in psychology, in archaeology. I mean, all the sciences. I mean, everything is changing. So it's really silly to believe in this logical fallacy. Another point that's made, this is tied to a compositional logical fallacy. So the compositional logical fallacy basically infers that something is true of the whole from the fact that it's true of some part of the whole. So this would be the opposite of the fallacy of division. The fallacy of division is inferring that something is true of one or more of the parts from the fact that it is true of the whole. So if A is part of B, then B has property X, therefore A has property X. Example, his house is about half the size of most houses in the neighborhood, therefore his doors must all be about 3.5 feet high. Of course, quite silly. So the fallacy of composition is the opposite of that. Something is true of the whole from the fact that it is true of some part of the whole. So A is part of B, A has property X, therefore B has property X. Example, each brick in that building weighs less than a pound, therefore the building weighs less than a pound. Or hydrogen is not wet, oxygen is not wet, therefore water, H2O, is not wet. So again, with these compositional logical fallacies, they can also be tied to the hallucination of the causal logical fallacy. So basically, just because part of something is true, the whole is true, or just because something was started, it was finished. For example, if you see a rocket launch, that must mean they went to the moon because the rocket launched. I mean, that's pretty silly. So if you can prove you left your driveway, that doesn't mean you drove from New York to LA just because there's a bunch of witnesses of you leaving LA. So this is all quite silly, of course. Going back just for a second to the reification logical fallacy, a lot of times this is all tied together where the abstract is hallucinated to affect everything. For example, people that claim that the Earth is a globe because gravity affects everything. So then they'll rope in, oh, well, what about satellites? What about all of these things that prove gravity? So they're tying in the circular reasoning logical fallacy with the reification logical fallacy, as well as compositional logical fallacies, creating the illusion that all of these pieces are interdependent and based on theories that have already been proven. Obviously, they could be working that way for completely different reasons than assumed. And that's where the burden of proof logical fallacy comes in, because they have to prove each point independently instead of hallucinating and roping in all of these points together. So the last two fallacies we're going to go over is the appeal to authority logical fallacy. So just because an authority thinks something, therefore it must be true. It's important to note that the fallacy should not be used to dismiss the claims of experts or scientific consensus. Appeals to authority are not valid arguments, but nor is it reasonable to disregard the claims of experts who have demonstrated a depth of knowledge. Okay, now here's the problem with this. There's experts on both sides of every issue ever. For example, anti versus pro. Nobody is an anti because they believed somebody living in their mom's basement posting a GeoCities blog. It's because these accomplished doctors published all these books and papers arguing against the use of. So there's doctors on both sides of the issue. That's where conflict of interest also comes in, because obviously the doctors paid by the pharmaceutical companies would be more likely to endorse those products, especially if they're getting kickbacks. And this has all been obviously proven to the tune of billions of dollars in court documents. I've posted these links all the time. You could look at the court cases. I mean, for example, Pfizer is the most fined pharmaceutical company in history with billions in fines for fraud. Now, again, that doesn't mean their products don't work. That just means they have billions ruled against them for fraud. Make of that what you will. Appeal to authority also, for example, in the tobacco industry, paid off a bunch of doctors and scientists saying that cigarettes are safe. But you also had doctors on the other side. This is why this fallacy is so silly, because there's experts on both sides of every issue. So you're basically just citing to an opinion. Also, this is kind of like an appeal to faith, to blind faith. Because this NASA priest said this, it must be true. Very silly, just like a priest at a church. Just because they said something doesn't mean it's true. Just because they claim to talk to God, that doesn't mean they actually do and have the actual real knowledge of anything. There's actually we got to go over a couple more fallacies. No true Scotsman logical fallacy, relatively popular. You made what could be called an appeal to purity as a way to dismiss relevant criticisms or flaws of your argument. In this form of faulty reasoning, one's belief is rendered unfalsifiable, because no matter how compelling the evidence is, one simply shifts the goalpost so that it wouldn't apply to a supposedly true example. This kind of post-rationalization is a way of avoiding valid criticisms of one's argument. Example, Angus declares that Scotsmen do not put sugar on their porridge, to which Lachlan points out that he is a Scotsman and puts sugar on his porridge. Furious, like a true Scot, Angus yells that no true Scotsman sugars his porridge. So this kind of added subjectivity. And mostly just, again, roping in anecdotal logical fallacies and all these things. A lot of these fallacious arguments have multiple fallacies as components in them, which is why it's important to understand all of them. There's actually a couple more. Genetic logical fallacy. You judge something as either good or bad on the basis of where it comes from or from whom it came. This is actually one of the most popular logical fallacies. Perhaps I should have started with it. This fallacy avoids the argument by shifting focus onto something or someone's origins. It's similar to an ad hominem fallacy in that it leverages existing negative perceptions to make someone's argument look bad without actually presenting a case of why the argument itself lacks merit. The most popular example of this is those with Trump derangement syndrome. Any argument they don't like or don't even want to process, they'll just say, oh, well, that person's a Trump supporter. So somebody could be screaming, 1 + 1 is 2. Nah, that's not true. They're a Trump supporter because they're wearing a MAGA hat. Or the argument I used to give before Trump derangement syndrome was a thing is, let's say a homeless bum druggie screaming on the street corner, 1 + 1 is 2. You say, oh, well, they're a homeless druggie. You can't trust what they say, even if they're screaming the ABCs in the actual correct order. Their argument is legitimate. They're saying something is true, but you're not even going to listen to the argument based on who they are. That is a genetic logical fallacy. Very, very silly. Another very popular fallacy, black or white logical fallacy, also known as the false dichotomy logical fallacy. You presented two alternative states as the only possibilities, when in fact more possibilities exist. Also known as the false dilemma, this insidious tactic has the appearance of forming a logical argument, but under closer scrutiny it becomes evident that there are more possibilities than the either-or choice that is presented. Binary, black or white thinking doesn't allow for the many different variables, conditions, and contexts in which there would exist more than just the two possibilities put forth. It frames the argument misleadingly and obscures rational, honest debate. So again, within the flat earth sphere, the heliocentric globe believers will always say, oh, well, if the earth's flat, where's the edge? Or the Earth is flat and yet all the other planets are spheres? I mean, this of course goes into straw manning as well. Again, a lot of times these fallacies overlap. But black and white logical fallacies, relatively popular. A lot of people use them. And of course, very, very silly. Another popular one from coincidence theorists and authority worshipping cultists. Oh, if the conspiracy is true, everybody's lying? Obviously not. All those people, a lot of people are fallible, or they just trust the corrupt, so they're not knowingly lying. They're saying what they believe is true. Therefore, they're not lying. But the dishonest authority worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists, they're either that mentally deficient that they can't even consider the possibility that humans are fallible and humans make mistakes. It's really weird. But these goofs always hallucinate that if there were a conspiracy, that would mean all these people or entities would have to be in on it, and there's absolutely no way. They could just simply be following orders, believing that the orders are legitimate, and that whatever they are presenting is actually true, when in fact it is not. And this is obviously how all the successful conspiracies are carried out, because you would want as few people in on it as possible, because everything just works easier that way. So these are basics. Another popular logical fallacy: appeal to incredulity or personal incredulity. Because you found something difficult to understand or are unaware of how it works, you made out like it's probably not true. Again, very popular in flat earth debate. A lot of heliocentric globe believers say, oh, well, what would the reason be for a flat earth cover-up? I don't see the reason. I don't see the motive. I don't see the motive. Therefore, it's not true. So these goofs appeal to their own ignorance and mental deficiency in not understanding the argument. Now, again, I'm not saying flat earthers are correct about anything, but if the reason was that good, and again, I'm not classifying, like, if flat earth is true, I am not saying any of the flat earthers have the motives correct for any kind of government cover-ups, even if it is true. Because a lot of conspiracies, alien, some of these Illuminati conspiracies, unless you have all these top-level clearances to know what the truth is, how would you know what the motive was, even if the conspiracy is true? And some of these far-reaching conspiracies that some find incredibly incredulous, the motive would have to be highly classified. Because if the motive was that easily well known, there'd be no reason for the cover-up. So again, this is something these authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists, they're so mentally deficient, they can't even understand these basic children's level logical fallacies. The last fallacy we're going to go over here is the bandwagon logical fallacy, or the appeal to popularity. This is also relatively a popular logical fallacy as well. So, appeal to popularity, or the fact that many people do or believe something as an attempted form of validation. The flaw in this argument is that popularity of an idea has absolutely no bearing on its validity. And the irony here is that a lot of, again, within the flat earth debate, a lot of the globe earthers say, oh, well, everybody believes it's a globe, therefore it's a globe. But in the past, however far you want to go back, if the majority believed it was flat, did that make it flat? Or once upon a time, when the majority of people believed that smoking was not harmful to your health, including experts. I mean, of course, appeal to popularity and appeal to authority often get roped in together as well, to make it look like a more legitimate argument. But again, if you just look throughout history, the majority of things, the majority of people believed throughout the majority of history have been wrong. That's where the old adage comes from: nothing popular is true, nothing true is popular. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that as well, but that's just a general rule of thumb, because if you look generationally, every generation, there's a lot of beliefs that switch, because you figure that more information is gained, because there's always missing pieces. There's always variables. Actually, there was one more fallacy that we might as well list, because we went through so many already. Appeal to ignorance. This is related to the shifting the burden of proof logical fallacy, but not exactly. So, appeal to ignorance is a logical fallacy that occurs when someone claims that a conclusion must be true if it hasn't been proven false, or false if it hasn't been proven true. The burden of proof logical fallacy is mostly just regarding positive claims. This is regarding either stance. So appeal to ignorance is a logical fallacy in which someone argues either for or against something because there is no contradicting evidence. In other words, it's based on the mistaken assumption that a lack of evidence is evidence. One falls victim to this fallacious line of reasoning when they assert that a claim must be true if it hasn't proven false, or false if it hasn't been proven true. Ignorance, or the lack of opposing evidence, is the main premise for the argument, hence the name appeal to ignorance. Now, this is really, really tricky for some, but I'm going to attempt to break it down as simple as possible. So this is also related to falsification is not dependent on replacement. It's independent of replacement. So if you can falsify something, you don't need to replace it with something else. A lot of goofs, especially in scientific debates, for whatever reason, they say, well, if you can't come up with something else, we're going to keep going with this. I mean, that is so dumb. Let's say you're a police detective and you only have one suspect and they have motive, means, and opportunity, maybe. But then you come across some evidence that disqualifies them as a suspect, but you can't come up with any other suspects. So you just continue going with them. And, well, it still must be them. Even though all of a sudden an alibi came up. Oh, well, they showed up on some security footage. Maybe it's doctored, maybe it's not. Well, it doesn't have to be them simply because they're not aware of other suspects. Especially if you poke enough holes where you disprove that it's them, or there's enough doubt that there's a strong possibility it's not them. There's simply nothing but really vague circumstantial evidence that won't hold up in any court of law. But because you're ignorant of any other possible theories, that doesn't mean everybody just needs to go with that one. This is also popular in flat earth debate, where people say, oh, well, if you can't come up with a better theory, you have to just keep going with the theory that has so many holes. This is actually used by both flat earthers and globe earthers, so it's an interesting one. All right, now that we have laid out all these fallacies, I know that took a little longer than I thought, but we're finally going to get into the debate, and we are going to have the fallacy counters up to see which side has the most fallacies, and if any, and we'll see if there's an obliteration coming, which I believe there will be. So let's get started here.
Right, without any further ado, let us bring in the guest for the Flat Earth debate. Here we go. Here's Flat Earth David. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me. This
Thank you for coming back.
Going to be interesting for sure.
It's going to be very interesting, isn't it? And Professor Dave.
Howdy.
Thank you for coming on for the first time.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your YouTube success, man. 2 million subs. That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the first time I think a real flat earther, I'll call myself a real flat earther, has spoken direct with Professor Dave, as he normally does videos, that just go out and pretty much straw man us, whether you know it or not, or gaslight us, and then there's really no way to respond because...
No, so you've never seen my channel ever and have no idea what I do because I make academic tutorials.
So... okay, how would we phrase that? Is that a logical fallacy there? Actually, we forgot one more. There's appeal to humor. So the appeal to humor logical fallacy is the use of humor to ridicule an opponent and or direct attention away from the issue at hand. In Latin, this is called argumentum ad festivatum and reductio ad absurdum. Like name-calling, red herring, and straw man, the appeal to humor is a fallacy that manipulates through distraction. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to avoid putting anything on the counter thus far because we're still on the intro, so I guess this wouldn't be part of the debate. But Dave, right off the bat, I mean, Flat Earth Dave here has made a claim that so-called Professor Dave has strawmans the Flat Earthers' arguments in order to appear to debunk them, which is actually true if you look at his channel. And Professor Dave responds with so sarcastically, again, sarcasm, a form of humor, that he hasn't seen his channel, as if he doesn't do this. Now, neither one actually demonstrated exactly how they do that, so even though Flat Earth Dave is technically correct here, I'm going to give Professor Dave the benefit of the doubt since the formal debate has not officially started and we're still on the intros. I won't put that on the counters.
I have, but your flat Earth stuff is gaslighting us essentially.
Is devastating and destroys flat Earth easily.
Absolutely. So
it started
big straw man. Oh, he says that they think the Earth is flat. What a straw man!
Oh man, so that's obviously not the straw man. So he just straw manned the allegations on the straw man. We're starting it now because I actually can't recall anyone in a debate ever straw manning on top of a straw man like Professor Dave just did. Because clearly the belief that's not the straw man. This is already hilarious and we're just getting started. So that's one logical fallacy count for Professor Dave right out of the gate. Just because it was a straw man on top of the straw man, I gave him a benefit of the doubt on the first one, but now we're firmly in straw man logical fallacy.
I'm with you. Listen, I don't mean to come off that way. Would it be okay to look for some common ground? Can I just ask a couple of quick questions, Dave? You good with that?
Whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah, I'm just for, to see if we have any common ground. Do you believe we went to the moon?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that governments are here, especially the American government, for the people's well-being?
It's a pretty complicated question.
Okay, you don't have to answer it. That's fine. That's good. Do you believe that there's censorship going on YouTube?
Yes.
Some stuff is deprioritized in the algorithm. I don't know if that qualifies as censorship.
Deprioritized. So he's saying that there is no censorship. So there's a clear difference here. So this is obfuscation. You could classify this under red herring because clearly YouTube flat out removes content, which is censorship. He's talking about now. He's obfuscating by saying that there is deprioritizing, which is also true. This is kind of a form of shadow banning or not recommending certain subjects or whatever, or being very selective where certain so-called controversial subjects, you will get the attempted debunking, whether or not the debunking is valid or not on many controversial issues. That'll come up first when you search certain topics. And the debunking of those debunkings will never come up when you search those. They will not be prioritized. So what Professor Dave just said is technically true. So that's two logical fallacies for Professor Dave at this moment. Now, how could he not know that YouTube censors and flat out removes? I'm assuming this is dishonesty. Now, again, I don't know. Perhaps Professor Dave has a mental disability and he is being honest and he simply does not have the processing power. I'm not going to assume to know what his psychological issues are or whether he's arguing in good faith or playing stupid and not arguing in good faith or whether he's actually that dumb. I don't know.
And is the news here to inform or to fill us with propaganda?
The news is largely propaganda. None of that has anything to do with the shape of the Earth, so I don't know what the hell you're even talking about. Literally none of that has to do with the shape of the Earth. So
now, Sean Atwood definitely looks like a guy with a mental disability. Because why is he laughing? Clearly, because we're talking about appeals to authority, scientism, these corrupt institutions that run universities and media platforms. I mean, this is all common knowledge to anybody who's not a complete religious fanatic in terms of being an authority-worshipping cultist who never questions anything coming from perceived authorities. But Sean Atwood here, I mean, if he's listening to this, I mean, he chooses that moment to laugh hysterically. I mean, he might not be all there in the head. I mean, this is shaping up to be quite entertaining.
You're really off to a bad start already.
Just looking for some common ground. That's all.
Well, if we both don't like the government, therefore the Earth is flat.
Wow, another straw man. Fallacy number 3, because that's clearly not what Flat Earth Dave clearly outlined his intention of seeing if they have any common ground in order I'm assuming he wanted to build arguments off of that, or even if not, even just small talk, making conversation at the beginning. And now Professor Dave, I mean, you could put that, I'm not going to give him 2 fallacies here, because again, he's trying to be humorous with the straw man. And technically it is both, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and just put it in as a straw man, because a lot of straw men are funny. So technically, to keep this as accurate as possible, appeals to humor will be I will put fallacies there that are not also other fallacies. So I'm not going to double up on that one.
The common ground is then we're going to try and keep talking points to 3 minutes each, responses to 2 or 3 minutes each, so we could get through this hour, and everyone could get an equal share of the time involved here. And I think the first point that we've got up on the list is, what is gravity?
You want to go first, Dave, or you want me to go?
Oh, okay. This is how we're doing this? Okay, so according to general relativity, it's the curvature of space-time around massive objects. And so this is one of the easiest ways to know that the Earth is a sphere, because everything we see, everything, including the Earth, right, very large, massive objects are crushed into a sphere. That's why stars, planets, moons, everything pretty much is spheres. So you can now go ahead and do your electric gravity bullshit, and then I'll explain to you why it's stupid.
Okay, so we have 2 fallacies there, because notice how he didn't provide the proof for, he just listed the theory. So that, again, a couple different fallacies there. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So he has components here of a compositional logical fallacy as well as the reification logical fallacy. I'm going to put it under reification just because he started mentioning all the other planetary bodies as if it's all interdependent and as if it proves something it doesn't actually prove. And he also didn't prove the theory true in the first place, because even if it is true, that doesn't mean it applies to all these other things. So we're going to put it in reification there, and then we have to do another one because he added the ad hom here. Since he didn't prove his point and provide evidence, we are going to add the ad hom. Just to clarify, I will not be adding the ad hom if he produces a non-fallacious argument and adds the ad hom on top of it. So another fallacy here for Professor Dave. This might be a record most fallacies in least amount of time so far. And Flat Earth Dave is doing pretty good here. Not a single fallacy yet. I've seen a couple of his other debates. He actually does use a lot of fallacies as well, but let's see how good he does here.
Well, the question is, does anybody any scientists or anybody that's ever proven that any of the luminaries we see in the sky are even physical, let alone spheres?
Yeah, we can see them in telescopes.
You can see them. So you believe that if you see something, that'll tell you its shape. So when I look at this, are these spheres?
Oh.
Are these spheres? Dave, are these spheres?
Yeah, no, I've seen this little trick, and I know the third one from the left is flat.
So Professor Dave here just committed a fallacy. We actually didn't even go over this one. Man, there's just so many fallacies. The fallacy of the single cause, or the reduction fallacy. So this is a fallacy that assumes there can only be a single cause. So things can only be what they look like. Or something that looks like a circle has to be a sphere. This is, of course, not true. This is an oversimplification. For example, if you see train tracks touch in the distance, that doesn't mean they actually touch just because they look like they touch. Things are not always what they appear. So is Professor Dave, does he have some kind of mental disability that he doesn't know this? So he says, oh, you can see it through a telescope. That is clearly and obviously a reductive fallacy. Oversimplification, because things are obviously not always what they look like. And this goof says, I've seen this trick, as if it's a trick. So Flat Earth Dave here is trying to teach some children's level logic that things are not always what they appear, and just because something looks like something, you actually have to provide evidence that it actually is, otherwise you're committing these logical fallacies. I mean, Professor Dave, it really looks like he's going to be the king of logical fallacies here, because he's committing, it's just one fallacy after another. Has he made a single non-fallacious point yet? And we just started. He's already committed all these fallacies. And calling this a trick as opposed to a legitimate explanation, that would also be an ad hom here. Are we going to give it ad hom or strong? Like he's pretending this is some kind of great exception. clearly things are not always what they appear. I mean, that's where the old adages come from. Don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, again, the example of convergence, the way the human's eye works. Just because you can hear something you think is a gunshot, but it's actually a car backfiring. So what you hear or see, what you think it means, is not necessarily what it actually means based on reality. I mean, that's why the scientific method was invented. So you can prove it's what it appears to be to you. I mean, observation is important, but you need to be able to measure. You need to have controls, which is what Flat Earth Dave is showing here. Like, how would you know the difference between something that looks like a circle? Because if it can be any of these things, you have to utilize controls. You have to prove. You have to utilize the scientific method. You have to be able to accurately measure, not hallucinate that whatever you think you see has to be true. And Professor Dave, I mean, is he this clueless? Can he actually be this dumb, or is he playing stupid? So calling this a trick, I mean, that's an ad hom because he's not showing how it's not legitimate. He's just calling it a trick. So we have to add another fallacy there.
It's showing you.
See, here's the
third
problem.
one from the left is fat. Dave, let me give me a second, then you can go.
No, because I've seen you do this. Because I watched 2 of your videos, and you say the same crap in every single one.
Right.
I know what these are. I know what these shapes these are.
So that's another ad hom. He's calling it crap without showing why it's crap. See, if he demonstrated why Flat Earth Dave's explanation here that even children can understand, things are not always what they appear to be, and again, the burden of proof is on positive claims. I mean, we could add that as a fallacy too. Again, I don't want to double up on these. I want to give Professor Dave here as much of a benefit of a doubt as possible. I mean, if he has some kind of mental disability, I mean, he's going to need these benefits of doubt because he's getting absolutely obliterated here by a flat earther. I mean, this is a thrashing of the highest order, and we just started. I mean, how long is this podcast going to be if I have to keep stopping it for every fallacy? I mean, these fallacies just keep on coming. I mean, here's a good, all the MindShock listeners out there, how many people think that Professor Dave is going to make a single argument that's not fallacious? Or is every single argument in this upcoming hour, are they all going to be fallacious? Or is he going to be able to get 1 or 2 in that are non-fallacious? I mean, that's the real question at this point.
So how do you know what shape the moon is? How do you know that the moon is even a physical object? During a new moon, no one sees the moon in the sky.
I know your talking points. So this works because that's not moving. The things in the sky move. So if you take the third one from the left, which I know is flat, and you move it around, it's going to start to change shape, right? If the moon was a flat disk, I don't even know if that's one of your talking points or not. As it passed over you, it would change shape. It would distort.
I don't think the moon is a flat disk at all.
Okay, so it doesn't matter though. That's why what you're saying is stupid, because these objects do not move.
So hold on. So wow, that was a lot of fallacies there too. So he's saying if something in the distance moves, that's going to prove shape, which again, how would that prove, like, it's kind of weird because how would it prove it? See, that's the thing. When you're being scientific, you can't just say things. You have to clearly explain how it would do that. Not just saying, oh, when there's this variable, that means this. So that would be a false dichotomy or black and white logical fallacy because he's stating movement versus non-movement, and those are the only explanations where if it moves, it has to be this. If it doesn't move, then maybe it could be this or that. Clearly fallacious.
Now, the other problem is it's not just about shape, it's about other things like composition. Do you know what spectroscopy is?
Yeah, spectroscopy is you can measure gases, but it has to be in a container. Where's the container?
No. Stop. We are looking at light. We're looking at light, and we are understanding about the materials, right? We're understanding the composition of things based on light. So when you start talking about gases, you show me immediately that you don't even know what spectroscopy is.
Wow. So already Professor Dave is making a fool of himself because spectroscopy specifically has to do with gases. I mean, let's dumb this down as simple as possible. Like, let's go to like wiki children's level definition here. So spectroscopy is the general field of study that measures and interprets the electromagnetic spectra that result from the interaction between electromagnetic radiation and matter as a function of the wavelength or frequency of the radiation. Now, I'm not convinced that Professor Dave even knows what matter is, so, I mean, let's do a basic definition of matter just here, just to lay it all out there. The substance, this is straight from Webster's, the substance of which a physical object is composed, or a more in-depth definition here, material substance that occupies space, has mass, and is composed predominantly of atoms consisting of protons, neutrons, and electrons that constitute the observable universe, and that is interconvertible with energy. So, the states of matter are solids, liquids, gases, and plasmas. So this is not hard stuff, okay? So, spectroscopy is the precise study of color as generalized from visible light to all bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. Historically, spectroscopy originated as the study of wavelength dependence on the absorption by gas phase matter of visible light dispersed by a prism.
So when you start talking about gases, you show me immediately that you don't even know what spectroscopy is.
So what Flat Earth Dave here, the reason he's talking about gases is because the Flat Earthers argue, their argument about gas, pressure, and containers. So in the vacuum of space, you're talking either a no pressure system or a super extreme low pressure system. In order for the pressurized system we have on Earth with Earth's atmosphere, again, I am not going to allege any of these theories are true or untrue on either side of this. Theoretically, you would have to have a container for these pressurized systems to exist next to each other, as in space, as in within the Earth's atmosphere. So what this goof, Professor Dave, he's not understanding. So because he doesn't understand something, he's getting all triggered, or he's pretending not to understand. Again, I don't know if he has a mental disability or if he's just playing stupid. But the reason Flat Earth Dave is bringing this up is because it's directly relevant to the type of matter and gases that would exist. Now, the spectroscopy is simply measuring it. Now, exactly how it's measured and what it is measuring, it doesn't tell you why it is that way. So this is a fundamental flaw of scientism cultists, because they just latch on to whatever religious institutions, the religious institutions of scientism, whatever they preach in their gospel textbooks, they just latch on. So nobody's disputing the measurements here. Now, why is it that way? For example, you can measure, oh, there's a teaspoon in a cup. Who put it there? Why is it there? I mean, all of these, exactly where did it come from? Why does it exist? Does it mean that this other thing's... So the measurement itself doesn't prove the why or how it got there or any of these other mechanisms. So that's what this goof, Professor Dave, he's not understanding this, so he's just stacking on these fallacies and ad homs because he doesn't even understand Flat Earth Dave's argument. Now, that doesn't mean his argument is correct in any way. But Professor Dave, clearly too clueless, too mentally disabled, or playing stupid to even understand the argument, so he has to pretend and hallucinate that Flat Earth Dave is the one that doesn't understand. So, I mean, let's continue this train wreck here.
So you do not know the ways in which we figure out things about celestial objects. You literally don't even know the definitions of the words that represent the techniques that we use.
So this is stacking on because it seems like Flat Earth Dave actually knows the definitions better than Professor Dave. Because Professor Dave he can memorize and regurgitate certain things, but he doesn't understand what they mean in relation to other things. He doesn't know what controls are. He's not even utilizing the basic scientific method. He's just regurgitating religious texts. Now, again, that doesn't mean it's untrue. It does not mean any of the theories are untrue, but he's not showing how they are true, which is why all of these ad hom attacks and strawmans. I mean, I don't even know where to place all these fallacies. Because now he's hallucinating and pretending to know what Flat Earth Dave knows when he just interrupted him and didn't even hear him out. So how does he know what he knows? This is strawman on top of ad hom. And, you could even rope in red herring there again. He's shifting everything away from having to prove his actual point.
So why are you even talking about it?
So my question is, spectroscopy needs to be in a container. Otherwise, you don't know what you're looking
Spectroscopy needs to be in a container. The study of how light interacts with matter needs to be in a container. What does that
otherwise
mean?
Well, it's pretty simple because, okay, prisms are actually a little bit more complicated. So again, let's reiterate what spectroscopy is. It is the precise study of color as generalized from visible light to all bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. Historically, spectroscopy originated as the study of wavelength dependence by the absorption of gas, phase, matter of visible light dispersed by a prism. Now, I will get into the prism just because it is relevant here. So, again, just as from Wiki, we're using the most basic definitions here. An optical prism is a transparent optical element with flat, polished surfaces that are designed to refract light. At least one surface must be angled. Elements with two parallel surfaces are not prisms. The traditional geometric shape of an optical prism is that of a triangular prism with a triangular base and rectangular sides, and in the colloquial use, prism usually refers to this type. Some types of optical prism are not, in fact, the shape of geometric prisms. Prisms can be made from any material that is transparent to the wavelengths for which they are assigned. Typical materials include glass, acrylic, and fluorite. A dispersive prism can be used to break white light up to its constituent spectral colors, the colors of the rainbow, as described in the following section. Other types of prisms noted below can be used to reflect light or to split light into components with different polarizations. Okay, what does this all mean in relation to the flat earth debate? So, if you're a flat earther claiming there is a dome above the earth, so what would this argument mean? So again, if Professor Dave is too clueless to even understand the basics of spectroscopy, of prisms, or what the flat earth argument even is, regardless of whether it's true or not, or how it would affect spectroscopy, I mean, why is this goof talking about it? I mean, he's psychologically protected. Why are you talking about it if you don't understand any of this stuff? So if flat earth Dave here, does he believe in a dome? I actually don't know that, but I know a lot of flat earthers do make the dome argument. If Flat Earth Dave is making the dome argument, or that these pressurized gas systems can need some kind of a container to exist, again, I'm not claiming any of this is true or untrue. I mean, we can go into the laws of thermodynamics and all of that. I'm not claiming those are true or untrue. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I am just examining their arguments for validity. So, if there is some kind of a glass-type dome over the Earth, certain flat earthers believe it's a snow globe-type reality. Other flat earthers believe it's an infinite plane with no dome. But if there is a glass dome, obviously it would affect spectroscopy, particularly in these gas pressure systems. And some flat earthers allege that the reason you see rainbows is because of a glass-type dome and the way that light works passing through this dome, or if some of these celestial bodies are actually some kind of holographic projections and not physical bodies, obviously some type of glass dome would impact all of this, including in the realm of spectroscopy. So, how would spectroscopy work with and without a dome over the Earth? That's the important question here, and that's why Professor Dave here is falling for all these logical fallacies, because he's not even understanding the argument that Flat Earth Dave is presenting, regardless of what is true or untrue.
Otherwise, when you're looking at the moon, you don't know what gases you're seeing in between us and the moon.
Gases? The moon is solid. The moon is a solid object.
How do you know that the moon is solid?
Okay, so wow. I mean, I think I'm going to break the logical fallacy counter. He's claiming the moon is a solid object. I mean, I'm going to throw that under burden of proof logical fallacy, because what evidence does he have to prove that? Because by his own argumentation, and I'm not using this as an argument, but the moon certainly does look translucent. And before he was the same goof that made the argument, oh, well, it looks like a sphere. Well, the moon looks translucent. Now, I'm not claiming it is, just because it looks like it's transparent, translucent, and not a solid object. If it is a gas, how would you know? So, again, he's the one making the claim, whereas Flat Earth Dave is kind of saying you don't know what it is. It could be a gas. So, technically, Flat Earth Dave is not committing fallacies if he's not making these hard claims and then not being able to back them up, which is Professor Dave's forte because he hasn't backed anything up yet.
How come you can't see it during a new moon?
Why can't you see it during a new moon?
Yeah.
Because do you understand how vision works?
Well,
right? In a new moon, what's happening in a new moon? The
There's no
light from
light.
the sun is illuminating the side of away from us.
So
Right? Light illuminates the things that it hits. So a new moon is when the side that the sun is illuminating is the other side away from us. What do you want it to do? The light to go around the moon and come back and
So-
hit the other side like magic?
So again, he's not able to, he's giving his theory, he's regurgitating the scientism textbook, which could be correct. Again, I know there's so many triggered goofs listening to this, so I'm going to try to preempt as much as possible. I am not saying that is not true, but how can he prove that is what is happening? Again, so he's calling vision. So again, he's basically making, I mean, there's so many logical fallacies here. So this is, of course, the reductionism or oversimplification logical fallacy. So how do you know train tracks touch in the distance? It's called vision. I can see them touch. I mean, this is the goofery that Professor Dave is bringing to the table here. And I'm starting to feel bad for the guy. I mean, he hasn't made a single non-fallacious point yet.
without interrupting, let me just answer. When we have when it's nighttime, you're away from all lights and there's a full moon, I can read by that moonlight. That moonlight casts a shadow on the ground. Don't interrupt. That casts a shadow on the ground. So that moonlight, which is reflected sunlight off a dusty, dirty, rocky, rock ball in your world, is bright enough to travel 238,000 miles to cast a shadow on the ground and to light up my book so I can read. During a total solar eclipse in your world, the Earth is a full Earth from the moon's point of view. It's bigger and shinier, and it should light up the moon, but it doesn't. And no telescope, from any position with the infrared or anything, has ever seen the moon.
Can you think of why? Can you think of why? Can you think of a much, much brighter object that is right there where the moon is?
Well, during
the corona of the sun, which is thousands of times brighter. What you're doing right now is you're basically saying, I'm going to shine a spotlight directly into your eyes, and then you tell me if you can see a firefly 2 centimeters to the right. Like, what are you talking about?
What? So this is known as a non sequitur logical fallacy, aka non-congruent argument logical fallacy, a statement that does not follow what was being discussed. So that's obviously not what Flat Earth Dave was saying at all, but this goof has to pretend it was. So it's kind of sort of like a straw man, but basically he specifically gave another example, which was non-congruent.
Do you seriously not understand this stuff? A child can understand this stuff.
So we got a lot of psychological projection there. So, I mean, are we going to add psychological projection there? I mean, yeah, that's a tough one. But that was also basically an ad hom attack because he, again, just basically calling him stupid in that way. So that's just another ad hom.
So when you're throwing out words like spectroscopy, what's the difference between spectroscopy and astrospectroscopy?
What do you mean astro? So astro is a prefix that means stars. So if that's even a word, it's spectroscopy pertaining to stars.
If that's even a word. So obviously spectroscopy refers to measuring light of all matter, not necessarily specifically to celestial bodies. So this goof just said before, if you don't even know the word, why are you talking about it? So he doesn't even know. So he's just throwing a wild guess out there. I mean, oh man, this is embarrassing for so-called Professor Dave. I mean, this goof is making such a fool of himself. I mean, non-stop fallacies, and then he doesn't even know the specific, because they're talking about spectroscopy as it pertains to celestial bodies, which is obviously astrospectroscopy. So, man, what a goof.
What are you, like, Googling stuff furiously over there?
I'm just asking you, I've taken a few notes.
Well, he could clearly see Flat Earth Dave's arms, so how could he be Googling? The desperation of Professor Dave here. I mean, what kind of fallacy would that be? I mean, would that be an appeal to humor because he's trying to kind of embarrass him as if he's just... I mean, clearly you could see his arms. I mean, what would he be Googling with?
figured out. I watch a few of your videos. I know the straw manning that you're going to try to do and the things that you're going to try to claim. And in reality, you know, an infrared camera, a regular camera from the space station, they should be able to see the sun, the moon either approach the sun, eclipse the sun completely, or exit the sun, and nobody has ever seen it. So again, why are we looking up in the sky?
Are we sure about that, though, that nobody has seen that infrared? I mean, again, the burden of proof is on positive claims, but he made an absolute claim that nobody has seen that. Now, again, I don't know if such footage exists, that infrared footage, because he made a good point that should happen. Do we know if it happened or it didn't happen? He made the claim that it did not. Now, obviously, one is not called upon to prove a negative, so it's up to Professor Dave to prove if it did happen. So, yeah, I can't... That's a problematic absolute claim by Flat Earth Dave, but technically it's not logically fallacious because one is not called upon to prove a negative.
Yeah, I just explained. I just answered your question. You just answered it again. You asked a question that I just answered. The sun is very bright, right? Way, way, way brighter than Earthshine. Do you understand that if something very bright, you're looking at something very bright, you can't see something way less bright?
So he doesn't understand infrared. So this goof, so he's basically trying to say that Flat Earth Dave just asked the same question again when he did not answer the question specifically. He fell for this, he gave a non sequitur example, and he also gave a reductionist logical fallacy where, oh, it looks like it, whatever. And so he's just got, I mean, is this guy mentally disabled? I mean, do people know, does anybody know Professor Dave personally? Like, does he have a mental disability? Because, I mean... Or is he just playing stupid? So this is why some people believe the whole Flat Earth conspiracy is a psyop. That goofs like Flat Earth Dave, that goofs like Professor Dave are specifically recruited to defend the heliocentric globe so poorly, to appear so stupid that anybody on the fence would choose the Flat Earth side, or anybody, you know, because the defense is intentionally so bad and so logically fallacious. Like goofs like Professor Dave, Signman, Dan. I mean, I actually did a podcast on these two goofs. It's almost like, is it possible to play this stupid? Like, I don't know. Are they intentionally playing stupid to defend the heliocentric globe so poorly as to cause an increase in Flat Earth membership? Again, this has nothing to do with which model is true or untrue, because regardless of true or untrue, if there's a psyop at play, is that one of the goals of the psyop? But let's continue with this train wreck here.
Dave, next to it. What are you not getting about that?
When there's a total eclipse of the sun, and you have the the little ring around there, you can block that out so it doesn't blind you, and you still can't see it. You know what?
It doesn't block it out. The corona. Have you never seen an eclipse?
Why are we talking? You can make a fake eclipse, right? By putting a disc in front of the sun and then looking at the corona, and you could do the same thing with the corona. You can block it. Why are we looking
really
up at the lights in the ceiling that determine the shape of the floor?
Because it works really well. It's the easiest way to figure out the shape of the Earth is by looking at the celestial objects in the sky and recording their motion.
So if you have a rotating lights on the ceiling, like some kind of chandelier, like a spinning chandelier, how would that prove the shape of the floor? I mean, this guy's this silly. I mean, I'm having a hard time believing that he's this dumb for real. I mean, because if he's that mentally disabled, I mean, his vocabulary isn't horrible. I mean, can he really be this mentally disabled and be arguing honestly in good faith here? Because he's this dumb, he doesn't understand children's level logical fallacies. Because he just keeps going with these reductionism logical fallacies. And I'm not going to say false dichotomy, because it's basically in the realm of reduction logical fallacies. He's saying these things move, therefore this. I mean, as if no other variables could possibly exist. I mean, it's so silly. I mean, he's never been to a planetarium. Like, I mean, it's just weird. I mean, this guy calls himself Professor Dave, and he can't even grasp children's level logical fallacies. It's weird.
It's very, very easy.
1 second, Ash. Ash has said we've got to move on to the next talking point, which is Space is not as depicted, displayed in media, movies, etc. Flat Earth, Dave, do you want to start with that one?
Ask the question again, please.
Space is not as depicted, displayed in media, movies.
Yeah, I mean, space is, they're just, giving us images of insanity in space. Like when they show us, nebulas, right? They show us this and they tell us this is where stars are born. This is where there's gas and dust, so much of it that it's creating stars and spitting them out like ping pong balls, where they go run away and they park themselves in the rest of the galaxy. This gas and dust in space, in a vacuum, in zero pressure, how does that work? How come this doesn't collapse in on itself? This is just
It does.
fantasy
That's how
painting.
stars are born.
Yeah,
They do collapse. It's how stars form.
So this is clearly Professor Dave just jumped in here with the burden of proof logical fallacy. So he's claiming that's how stars form, but how is that demonstrated? Because Flat Earth Dave's point here is these computer-generated images, or at least somehow edited. I mean, these are not, I don't believe they're even claimed to be raw images. And if they are claimed to be raw, again, that would have to be proven that they are not edited. So Professor Dave just takes it on blind faith from the Church of NASA or any of these other institutions that these are legitimate images, and also that the theory of how stars are formed are legitimate, because I mean, it's very difficult. Again, the burden of proof is on positive claims. If you're claiming billions of years causes this, X amount of energy causes this, gravity is not only real, but this is how it interacts with all of these other things, and this is how a star is born, you have to prove that. So this is clearly a burden of proof logical fallacy. Flat Earth Dave here is basically saying, is just asking questions of the theory. I don't believe he's making a positive claim per se. He's just kind of saying, this is silly, or this doesn't make sense, but I don't see a positive claim yet. So I don't know, has Flat Earth Dave made a single fallacy yet? Because he's properly asking for a burden of proof of positive claims. Now, he did make that comment about spitting out ping pong balls. That's kind of an appeal to humor, but he's also asking, he's properly utilizing burden of proof. So that wouldn't necessarily be fallacious in that context, and Professor Dave is not able to supply the proof. He just says, oh, that's how it is. So if he can't actually prove anything he's saying, I mean, what is he doing here? I mean, you could even tell by the look on his face, he's either mentally disabled or he's really enjoying himself by trolling and playing stupid on purpose, trying to come up with the dumbest arguments. I mean, I don't know which one it is. If I had to lean in a direction, I mean, I don't know. I might have to lean that he's just a troll and he's just really dishonest, and this is clearly not a good faith debate, and he's only there to troll and intentionally put forth stupid arguments, either because he's a paid shill to do so, or he's just a troll and he thinks it's fun to defend the heliocentric globe so poorly. I mean, I don't know. Or he's mentally disabled, or if anyone else has any other theories, feel free to chime in. Again, I'm not alleging anything is true or untrue.
Dave, in your world, this is gases are collapsing upon themselves and then igniting themselves in a vacuum, in a vacuum, and then they burn
stop. Look, I know that you want to just spew your script without anybody challenging, but you say so many stupid things.
Script, David.
Oh, there's another ad hom, because he's not sure how are they stupid. Because he's asking a question. Asking a question is never stupid. Asking for someone to satisfy the burden of proof on a logical or scientific argument they're making, how is that stupid? But a clueless goof might think it's stupid. Someone hopelessly indoctrinated into the cult of scientism who has no argument and cannot argue legitimately, they have no recourse but call it stupid. I mean, look at this goof.
And I'm here to tell you why everything you're saying is stupid.
Well, notice how he didn't actually say why it was stupid. He just used a logical fallacy or an appeal to faith in order to say that this is true or that, but he's not actually showing how is it true. How has the scientific method demonstrated that? How have controls been clearly utilized to measure the dependent variable, the independent variable, and that this theory is actually true? Notice how he's done none of those things this entire time.
So when you say stars igniting in a vacuum, the reason that's confusing for you is that you think stars are little bonfires.
No,
because you're a moron.
So clearly, he doesn't think that. I mean, he's clearly stated they might be hologram. They might not. They might be holographic projections or whatever. So he just layered on a straw man plus an ad hoc. I mean, the rate of logical fallacies are increasing here. Professor Dave's trying to set a record for putting forth the most logically fallacious debate in the history of debate, and he's doing a pretty good job with that so far.
Because
No,
you don't understand nuclear fusion.
you think
Nuclear
that
fusion is the process by which stars glow.
Oh, wow. It's just nonstop fallacies. So now Professor Dave is regurgitating another religious theory from his text. Now, if you want to claim it's not religious and it's proven science, then you have to actually cite the proofs. Like, how is that proven? Because he's just doing the equivalent of a priest reading from the Bible. He's not actually supporting any of these claims, even if they are true. He hasn't been able to support a single point here. So nuclear fusion, again, let's just go over it real quick for the people that don't know. The most basic definition straight from the wiki: it's a reaction in which two or more atomic nuclei are combined to form one or more different atomic nuclei and subatomic particles, neutrons or protons. The difference in mass between the reactants and products is manifested as either the release or absorption of energy. This difference in mass arises due to the difference in nuclear binding energy between the atomic nuclei before and after the reaction. Nuclear fusion is the process that powers active or main sequence stars and other high magnitude stars where large amounts of energy are released. Again, so in this obviously just a theory. If he wants to say that theory is definitely proven, he can cite the proofs. Notice he has not cited a single proof in this entire so-called debate. Also, if you're in a planetarium and you're just looking at a generated light or light from a projector, that light is not being emitted from what appears to be a star or a planet in the planetarium. I mean, this is a very simple argument, very simple concept. Again, I am not claiming that the flat earth model or the planetarium, we're living in an artificial planetarium type universe. I'm not claiming that's true or untrue. I'm not claiming the heliocentric globe model is true or untrue. But this Professor Dave goof, if you notice, he's just regurgitating religious information religiously, regardless of whether the information is true or false. He hasn't been able to support a single point. All he does is mostly logical fallacies. Well, actually not mostly, exclusively logical fallacies and ad hom attacks. So basically straw manning, which Flat Earth Dave actually called, which is what's hilarious. He's like, oh, you're just going to straw man. And that's all Professor Dave does. As well as all these other logical fallacies. I mean, he's kind of hitting more than one fallacy. I mean, he's making the rounds. He's not exclusively spamming straw man and ad hom, yes. And strawman a lot, but he's also hitting these other logical fallacies. We have to give him credit. He's being slightly diverse with his fallacies. Let's see if he hits other ones as well.
They're not little fireballs. And you could learn that by Googling something for 5 seconds, but you don't do it.
So this is an appeal to authority logical fallacy, because he's saying Google's the authority, just like saying, oh, well, you could, if you don't believe God exists or Jesus was resurrected, you can just 5 seconds go check the Bible. Check the Bible. That's somehow proof. I mean, this goof is really, this is probably the worst defense of the heliocentric globe I have ever seen. I mean, this is bad, because even some of the goofiest clowns defending the heliocentric globe, and that's another reason I think this is all a psyop, because there's definitely intelligent heliocentric globe believers out there. But they never actually publicly debate, almost like the fixes. Or I've also postulated they might find it so funny that these clueless goofs like Professor Dave are the ones defending the heliocentric globe, and they find it so funny they don't want to put a stop to these antics by bringing forth legitimate defenses of the heliocentric globe, because then their comedy source would end. I just proposed that as one possible theory. Again, I'm not alleging that's true or untrue either, but you don't see intelligent heliocentric globe defenders publicly debating. So, yeah, it's very, very curious.
So, Dave, you believe that all the rocky bits turn into perfect balls, and then all of the gases somehow start getting gravity, and they start pulling it together, and they get so
getting
big.
Gravity? What do you mean getting gravity?
How do they grow into stars? How come the dust is accumulating? What's bringing it together? Is somebody
Gravity.
it up like a snowball?
So he just I mean, okay, I have to revisit the possible mental disability theory. I mean, what does he mean by gravity that's causing this? And then Flat Earth Dave asks him the question. He says gravity. I mean, I don't know, man. This is painfully hilarious. I mean, this is a unique brand of comedy. It's like painfully hilarious.
Gravity.
So they get something, and it's a tiny bit of gravity pulls in some more dust. It pulls in not dust, it pulls in gases, and somehow it's pulling all of these gases together and turning into a nuclear furnace that burns for billions of years. I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. And if you want to believe that, that's the world.
So centuries of brilliant astronomers versus nuh-uh.
Another solid appeal to authority logical fallacy. So, and he also roped in there appeal to popularity because he's saying all these centuries, all these people. So it's not just one authority, it's all these authorities over a long period of time. Somehow they're legitimate because centuries of people believing in God, that must mean God is real. I mean, centuries of these priests believed it, right? I mean, it really is a question. If he's mentally disabled, obviously he wouldn't know how dumb he sounds. But if he's not mentally disabled and this is all just intellectually dishonesty of the highest order and he's just a troll, I mean, that could theoretically work as well. I don't know.
Is that really all you have? Is the entire field of astronomy and you going, I don't like it.
So that's another straw man and burden of proof, because obviously that's not all he has. He's made tons of arguments. So that's another straw man. And shifting of the burden of proof logical fallacy, because no matter how many and that's built on top of the appeal to authority, appeal to popularity logic fallacy. I mean, Professor Dave really is talented. You have to give it to him. He's not only rapid fire fallacy after back-to-back fallacies in record order, but he's also stacking multiple fallacies within the same argumentative stream here. So his argument, he stacked all these fallacies on top of each other. I mean, this is impressive stuff.
That's dumb. I'm dumb and I don't get it. So astronomy is wrong. That's literally your argument against astronomy right now.
And then another ad hom there. And then also saying literally what he's doing, which is clearly not what he's doing. So another straw man there.
You never met these men. You don't know anything about these men other than the stories that the controllers of this world tell you.
You know they wrote books, right? They wrote books that we can read.
So that's another shifting the burden of proof fallacy, because how does he know those particular guys wrote the books? He took it on faith. Just because you can read a book, that doesn't mean you could read the Bible. Well, I mean, that's, like you could say, oh, well, the Bible is the word of God. You can read it. You can read it, right? The Bible was written, and the Bible is the word of God, right? I mean, that's how clueless Professor Dave is coming off here. I mean, this is tough. This is really tough.
And then we base astronomy on that and do astronomy every day, right?
Dave.
So that would be a reification logical fallacy, because he created this construct of astronomy as if it's concrete, as if all of the theories of astronomy must be true because astronomy has been done for X period of time and is done now. So, yeah, again, impressive stream of logical fallacies from Professor Dave.
Try not to interrupt. Eratosthenes figured out the shadow. Eratosthenes figured out the diameter, the circumference of the Earth with his sticks and shadows. But nobody in that area that came out of that, other mathematicians, never wrote any books about him. They ignored him. They just never mentioned it, and then all of a sudden it shows up in the 1900s in books that go into the education
that's not true.
system.
I mean, if you're just going to lie, then we can just play the lie game.
And Dave.
How is that not true? Does he have a single source to disprove that? So, I mean, so Flat Earth Dave is not making the positive claim here. He's saying we can't prove this guy existed. How do we know that he really existed? Professor Dave comes in and he just accuses him of lying, which is an ad hom attack, basically calling him a liar, and yet not citing the proof. See, if he had cited the other individuals who wrote about this guy or verifications and then called him a liar after that, that would be okay, and it wouldn't be an ad hom because he clearly said, although, and it still might, because if in order to be a liar, you're basically giving information you know is not true, right? So if he would believe it was true, technically he wouldn't be a liar. He would just be putting forth false information. But either way, notice how Professor Dave never backs up any points. He just called them a liar without actually naming all those other individuals. Now, I actually don't know who mentioned this guy or didn't mention this guy or whatever, but I'm just exposing the fallacies here because, again, if one understands the burden of proof logical fallacy, one is not called upon to prove a negative. So you don't have to prove someone didn't exist. But if you're saying someone existed, that's a positive claim, so you have to prove that they existed and they wrote what they wrote, if you're claiming that.
What about the fact that proves nothing? It works perfectly on a flat Earth. Sticks and shadows prove the Earth is flat. And it proves it's a globe.
See, that's a great example of not using logical fallacies, because notice how Flat Earth Dave did not exclusively focus on the sticks and shadows proving a flat Earth, because again, you're going to assume variables. You're going to assume size of the sun, distance of the sun, all of these assumptions that you're using to make a conclusion, if you're doing that to make your conclusion. I don't know if Professor Dave is going to defend that or not, but if Dave had claimed that, that would have been the false cause logical fallacy. Because all of these unknown variables, the relationship of those variables might not be what is assumed due to other variables. So if Flat Earth Dave had claimed it proves only a flat Earth, he'd be guilty of that. If Professor Dave claims that definitely proves globe Earth only, then he will be guilty of that, so let's see.
But you'd have to assume parallel rays. Listen to this. Aristophanes believed that parallel rays are coming into Earth, right? And no one has ever seen parallel rays coming into Earth, right? When we look, we always see them curved. We always see them crepuscular. But he also believed that the Earth was geocentric and we had an infinitely far sun.
Also, let's see if Professor Dave can address the crepuscular rays argument. There is a pretty decent crepuscular rays argument in favor of the heliocentric globe to an extent. Let's see if Professor Dave knows it or if he's clueless.
And so that sun is orbiting around a
Infinitely
minuscule...
far?
Well, infinitely far. Infinitely far means so far away that the rays come in parallel. And that's a whole nother problem. But how is a distant sun orbiting around a speck Earth in the middle of space? That doesn't make sense, and they didn't think about that.
What doesn't make sense? What doesn't make sense about an Earth orbiting a sun? What?
No.
You going that doesn't make
hear
sense?
Dave,
Isn't an argument?
Dave, stop being a dick. Listen to what I said.
You stop being a dick.
I'm gonna count that. I mean, that's an ad hom for both of them, because that was, he could have just said stop interrupting, but
The Eratosthenes believed that the Earth was geocentric, that the sun orbited us, but the sun was a distant sun.
and that's also another a straw man for so-called Professor Dave, because he didn't even listen carefully, because this was on a geocentric globe, and he immediately jumped to, oh, how does it not make sense? Because he's so triggered, obviously, or just intentionally trolling, whatever the case may be, or mentally disabled, whatever.
How does a distant gigantic sun orbit a minuscule speck Earth?
Well,
Okay? Yeah, you have no
How?
answer for that.
They don't know. It's the ancient Greeks. They didn't know. Now we know, right? We figured out heliocentrism in like the 16th century.
So notice how he completely dodged. We're not talking about specifically just geocentrism versus heliocentrism. He's asking specifically about the angle of rays relative to that particular sticks and shadows experiment and the crepuscular rays, which Professor Dave does not address at all. So this would fall under the red herring logical fallacy, because this is a misdirection. Because he's clearly not addressing the point here and simply saying, oh, they were the ancient Greeks, they didn't know, now we know. How do we know? Notice how he never backs anything up.
His
So
story
it was like 500 years ago. It's a pretty long time.
His story makes no sense. And the other question is, you believe that the sun rays that come in are parallel, right?
No, look, there are rays that are parallel, and then you can point a ray from the edge, one edge of the sun and the other edge. Look, light is going in all directions, right? The sun is expelling light. They're spherical waves of light, photons in every direction. right? So you can identify parallel rays, and then you can identify one from this edge. And if you want to talk about individual photons, you can draw paths from the edge of the sun going in one direction, the edge of the sun going in the other direction. You're trying to oversimplify things. You're trying to go, oh, it's crepuscular, it's all parallel, and so then this time it works for my talking point, and then another time it doesn't work for my talking point.
My point is,
Wow, that was spot on psychological projection, because that's exactly what Professor Dave just did. Because he's saying, oh, they're just going in all directions. But what he did with his fingers there, why do they never cross then if they're going in all directions? Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. That's not part of my argument. I'm just addressing his argument. Even with his fingers, he did the paths as if they could cross, and yet we don't have crossing rays. Now, basic geometry would suggest that the sun would be close based on the clouds and the angle of light. I mean, now flat earthers claim you could just use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate the distance based on the rays, but obviously light beams are not solid objects, so it's not quite that simple. And there's actually a really good explanation for this. Again, not necessarily proving flat earth or globe earth, but proving that it doesn't necessarily have to be the flat earth model being true. It could still work in a heliocentric globe model with a fairly distant sun. But again, Professor Dave he doesn't seem to possess any kind of intelligence of any kind, because he can't even bring forth this very easy answer to the crepuscular rays.
my point is Aristophanes' story doesn't make any sense with a distant sun orbiting a geocentric Earth.
Yeah, if you just say it doesn't make sense and stop talking, I guess.
And that's what he says. Oh, it doesn't, which is exactly what Professor Dave does. Oh, it makes perfect sense. You just don't understand, without actually proving anything. So, solid straw man there from Professor Dave again, because Flat Earth Dave is giving very specific examples, and he's not just saying it doesn't make sense. He's asking for positive proof correctly asking for the burden of proof to be satisfied, of which Professor Dave can offer nothing.
How does a distant sun orbit a geocentric Earth when the Earth is tiny and the sun is gigantic?
Well, it doesn't.
In your
Long
model.
story short, it doesn't. Yeah. But
so
he was an ancient Greek, and he didn't know heliocentrism.
Wait, it doesn't? The sun? Wait, what?
They didn't know when Newton developed Newton's law of universal gravitation. He didn't know why massive objects attract one another.
So that's the circular reasoning logical fallacy, assuming they do. Because he's asking why do they, but if they don't even do that, like again, you have to prove each step. This is science. This is not religion stacking where you have decks of cards, just religious claims, accepting everybody to take it on faith, and then ad homs when they don't, instead of utilizing the scientific method with controls.
Right? He just said, this is what happens, and I have this equation, and we use Newton's equations to do all these incredible calculations that predict the motion of objects on Earth and in space. He didn't know what gravity was. Einstein gave a better explanation, the curvature of space-time are warped around massive objects.
Which has been easily debunked by Run Z Cow. I mean, he debunked it, Einstein's relativity. So again, he's just kind of preaching it, oh, well, this gospel from the Bible proves this. He doesn't show how it proves it. That would be scientific and logical, but Professor Dave, he's just a religious scientism cultist, so he can't actually defend his position using logic and reason and actual science. He can only make religious claims and ad hom attacks.
The curvature of space-time are warped around massive objects. We're probably going to get a better model later. Just that we don't know why things happen doesn't mean we can't do science at predictive power. So as it turns out, Eratosthenes and Ptolemy, the Ptolemaic model, was wrong. Heliocentric model is correct. It doesn't matter that they didn't know that part, or that they didn't know why something happens.
And notice how, again, he has no proofs for how it's proven that is correct. Also, the claim that you don't need to know why something to make predictions. I mean, that's a good point there, because again, with the flat Earth model, the astrolabe, the sextant, all these navigators were able to predict using the flat Earth model. Doesn't mean the flat Earth model is true, but you can still predict things using so-called faulty models, or models that are not true. Now, again, Professor Dave, for whatever reason, I mean, there's just a fundamental lack of understanding of this. Now, his subconscious clearly understands because his psychological projection is quite accurate. Because all these things he's accusing Flat Earth Dave of, he's clearly doing himself. So this is another reductionism logical fallacy, claiming that you can only predict things if it's true. And that's pretty much what he's doing here, as if the predictions must rely on some model that's true, even though he says it doesn't, but he's using that as a defense for the heliocentric globe. So that's the added hypocrisy to that on top of all of it. And obviously nobody's surprised on how this goof operates by now, but...
Do you not understand how science works?
So if he was wrong and the Earth and the were heliocentric, do you think his experiment proved your globe?
Well, yeah, it did.
So clearly, the goofery here, because he's, again, that was the fallacy that I mentioned before, the false cause logical fallacy. Because clearly that experiment doesn't prove either model, which Flat Earth Dave openly admitted not falling for the fallacy, but the goof Professor Dave here clearly fell for the fallacy.
All of those experiments proved the globe. It just didn't have anything to do with heliocentrism. It proved the Earth is a sphere.
How did it do that? These religious citations are hilarious.
Absolutely not, because with a local sun in like the flat Earth is.
And credit to Flat Earth Dave here. He's not getting flustered by this goof. He's clearly just making presentations for the listeners and the viewers of Sean Atwood's podcast here. It's almost like he's not even talking directly to Professor Dave, because he knows that either Professor Dave is just mentally disabled, he's not going to understand anything anyway, or he's an intentional shill who's not going to argue in good faith and is just trolling and trying to make the worst defense possible of the heliocentric globe just for kicks and antagonization. So he looks like he's just making a presentation for all the viewers, nothing to do with Professor Dave. So credit to Flat Earth Dave for realizing who he's dealing with here.
We have no shadow here, and we have a shadow here, and then you could do your math and figure out what the sphericity of this flat plane is, right?
Okay, so for that to work, how close is the sun?
How close is the sun?
How close is the sun?
Wow, that's the first point he made, just asking a question, very valid in this. That's the first time. Is that the first time he's spoken without spewing a logical fallacy? So, I mean, we're a good amount into the debate now. I think that's the first time he asked like a good faith question or honestly engaged in debate thus far.
Yeah,
really close, like right above the clouds, which we'd be able to see if you went up in a plane or a balloon, and it'd be like right there.
Well, that's a straw man logical fallacy again, clearly, because how close is? I mean, between 93 million miles. I mean, and thousands of miles or 100,000 miles, you wouldn't necessarily see it there, but he had to straw man that in there. Like, so he didn't last. Without the fallacy, he couldn't last. And I mean, not only was that a straw man, but it's also kind of a false dichotomy, because he's saying if it's close, it has to be right at the clouds or 93 million miles away. There's no other option. I mean, what is this? I mean, this goof, like, I don't know. What does everybody make of this goof so far? Is he mentally disabled, or is he simply a troll intentionally trying to be as stupid as possible for trolling purposes?
Huh?
Dave, there's tons of videos explaining how the sun is an apparent object, and we all see it in a different position.
Oh, there's videos that say dumb things.
No,
it's true.
So that was a non sequitur on top of an ad hoc.
Show science, show experiments. And when you try to triangulate the sun, there's a problem. You can't do it. You can't triangulate the sun. So how far the sun is, some flat earthers say it's 3,000 miles away. I don't like that answer. The math works. We can scale it and make it
The
6,000
math
miles
works.
away.
You've never done any math in your entire life. You
Hey,
just
hey,
say the
Dave,
math
stop,
works
stop
and expect
saying,
people to.
just stop being a condescending prick. All right, try.
Why
Try
don't
for a
you
few
stop
minutes.
condescending to the entire human race and pretending that every scientist ever is a liar and satanic deceiver? That's much more offensive than me calling you stupid, which you
Dave,
are.
Wow, so many fallacies. I mean, he just keeps upping the ante ad hom after ad hom after ad hom after straw man. Obviously, that's not what Flat Earth Dave believes, but he has to pretend it is. So we actually left off another, man, I have to add another logical fallacy to the list, appeal to extremes. Erroneously attempting to make a reasonable argument into an absurd one by taking the argument to the extreme. So if X is true, then Y must also be true where Y is the extreme of X. So there can't be just a couple of these deceivers. It has to be every single one, and every single one has to be in on it because humans can't be mistaken. So this goof also used the appeal to extremes, which I believe is it's also a straw man and a false dichotomy and all these other things, but I think appeal to extremes most accurately covers that one.
Dave, what is the sun?
What is the sun? It's a star.
It's a star. It's a burning.
It's a star.
It's a nuclear furnace that's working perfectly, and it's bending space-time where it could hold on to all of the planets that go all the way out to Pluto. Is that your belief?
Well, Pluto's now a trans-Neptunian object.
So we'll go
But
Neptune.
yes,
We'll go,
yes.
And then the sun's gravity ignores all of the moons because the moons are attracted to their planets, and it negates the sun. That's what you believe.
What do you mean negates the sun?
Yeah,
So
negates the sun.
moons. So what you're saying is that like one of Jupiter's
I'm
moons
asking
should go
you.
flying towards the sun? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm asking you if you believe that the sun's gravity has no effect on moons.
Yeah, it had. You can calculate. You can see. This is what real scientists and people who understand science can do calculations. So instead of you going, I don't believe it, what you could do is you could take Newton's law of universal gravitation and take a moon, whatever moon, if you want to talk about our moon or one of Mars's or one of Jupiter's or whatever, and you could calculate a number that is the gravitational attraction between the sun and whatever moon you're talking about.
So again, he's got a reductionism logical fallacy here, as if that's the only way to do it, as if there are no other forces that could ever be acting upon it, as if there are no as of yet undiscovered forces, as if it definitely can only be a mass attraction, mass type gravity that could be responsible for this, simply on the basis of this calculation. Without knowing what causes it, he's going to continue pretending he knows for sure. So this is, again, I mean, he's trying to set records here in the amount of logical fallacies used in the least amount of time.
And then you could do the same thing for the moon and its parent planet that it is orbiting. Which number do you think is going to be bigger, buddy? Which one do you think is going to be bigger?
And so
the planet, the one that it is orbiting around.
When we have a planetary alignment where all the planets are lining up, all of that gravity.
Hang on, you know what?
And you know what's curious too? Like, I can't really, Flat Earth Dave here, he's not really making too many claims here. He's mostly asking questions about how the model works. So he's not really making strong arguments here for the Flat Earth at all. I don't know if that what was his goal here, but in doing this, he's also not really committing logical fallacies because he's doing it this way.
Sorry. I would like you to actually just address what I just said, because this is what happens is I say something, or a flat earth debunker like myself says something that just annihilates the idiotic thing you just said, and then you just gish gallop to another point.
So that's another ad hom and straw man, because he's trying to pretend that, or I mean, basically there's so many fallacies stacked here. But the psychological projection is accurate, because when Flat Earth Dave completely annihilates Professor Dave, he doesn't address it at all, like the corpuscular rays, even though there's actually a really, this is like maybe 4th, 5th graders can actually rebut Flat Earth Dave with that, but Professor Dave can't. He's that clueless. But at least his subconscious picks up on it, because his psychological projection here is on point.
I would like you to admit that what you just said is stupid based on what I just said.
But what he just said was, all he brought forth were fallacies. So why, what is Flat Earth Dave supposed to do with the he could point out the fallacies. He should. I don't know. Again, I'm not saying Flat Earth Dave is logical in any way. I am not saying his conclusions about anything are correct. He just happens to commit infinitely less logical fallacies than this Professor Dave goof, which is nothing but faith and fallacy. So what is Flat Earth Dave supposed to do here? He should just address how logically fallacious this goof Professor Dave is. Now, one of the most logical flat earthers is Austin Whitsitt, or Whitsitt Gets It. I mean, he has a really strong command of logical fallacies. He should debate Professor Dave, because then he would be able to point out all these logical fallacies and how goofy Professor Dave is here, because he can't support a single point he just made. He's doing this religious regurgitation and accept it and expecting people to admit those religious regurgitations are actually true without backing it up. It's weird.
Repeat what you said.
I just explained to you why what you said about the sun and the moon is stupid.
Another ad hoc.
And you jumped to another talking point.
So you say that the gravity of the planet is holding on to these moons, and it's so much stronger. Let me finish. I'm reiterating what you say to show you how stupid it is. It's holding on to the.
That's an ad hoc for Flat Earth Dave.
To the planets, but the sun's gravity, it can hold on to the planets, hold on to distant planets, but can't affect those moons at all.
Can't affect, like I just said, you can do a calculation. Did you want to do the calculation? Do you want to do it together? Do you want to learn something today?
Do you want to learn something? Clearly, Professor Dave doesn't want to learn about logical fallacies or the scientific method, because, again, all he has are these reductionism logical fallacies, as if that's the only explanation. I mean, you could also argue that's a false dichotomy, because either this theory is, this is just really rough.
It's called Newton's law of universal gravitation. Do you know what is in the denominator? R squared. It drops off, gravity drops off by the square of the distance. So as things get very, very far away, their gravitational influence is dramatically less, exponentially so. So when you have a moon that is right near a planet, the gravitational effect is way more than the faraway sun. Isn't that neat? Isn't that a neat thing that we can do with math and numbers that are real things that scientists do?
Well, you can say 1 + 1, one unicorn plus one unicorn is 2 unicorns, but you still have to prove the unicorn is what you say it is, which, again, Professor Dave does not. He's got this fundamental lack of understanding of basic children's level logical fallacies like burden of proof. Because if, let's say, just for the sake of argument, we are in some kind of giant planetarium, those objects aren't even solid or real. They're just holographic projections. Like, what are you calculating? There is no mass attracting mass. But Professor Dave's too clueless to understand even the argument, even that theory he can't understand. Or he can, and he's just trolling, but I don't know.
Instead of just going, it doesn't make sense, so that's dumb.
Another straw man.
You done?
Yeah, what do you got? Do you want to address this thing, or do you want to jump right to another thing?
I want to jump to something else, because you say that the sun's gravity that can hold on to Neptune and Pluto can't affect the moon, which is way closer to it, and that the Earth's gravity overwhelms that. That's stupid. That's me saying it.
Why?
You're the
all you're saying is that's stupid. All you're saying is that's stupid. Why?
Wow, the psychological projection is on point. All Professor Dave is saying that's stupid, but he can't actually support his arguments. Asking for a burden of proof to be met is never stupid. Just like when Professor Dave asked that question, how far is the sun? Flat Earth Dave didn't respond with, that's stupid. Because that's a valid question. If you're trying to say the sun is X distance, it's up to you to prove it.
Saying is that it works because I could do math, but it doesn't. It doesn't work.
What do you mean it doesn't?
Dave, model it. You ever know about the 3-body problem? I'm sure you know about that.
Oh, the 3-body problem. So we can't do
Dave,
calculations.
Stop being such a condescending prick. We already know. Just talk normal. Have a discussion.
Sorry, hang on one second. This is serious. This private chat keeps covering the screen. Can this stop? Why is this doing this? The private chat.
Yeah.
Like,
I shouldn't cover the chat, should it? Just trying to make sure everything's all right.
Covering the whole screen. All right. Anyway,
hang on. Yes, we're sorting it out. There seems to be a problem with Sean's. I can't hear you, Sean.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what's going on. I've been watching Sean every now and then, just chatting away, and we've not been hearing him. There's tons of important snippets of information lost forever to the ethers of the internet. How are you guys doing? There's a lot of back and forth, isn't it? It's a very, dare I say it, American debate, isn't it? It's insults and stuff.
Well, here's the thing. I would like to get off of the lights in the sky because I'd rather talk about the shape of the Earth.
Because they destroy the flat Earth?
How so? If it's a planetarium, the lights in the sky or whatever they are. I mean, it's weird. I mean, again, I can't tell if Professor Dave is just this mentally disabled. I mean, he's getting completely obliterated, and his subconscious knows. That's why his projection is so accurate here. But this kind of, it's kind of hard to keep track of all these fallacies because usually his argument there's several different fallacies rolled in. So they're not even easily distinguishable because he keeps stacking them in single statements. Like right now, he's hallucinating and pretending that lights in the sky somehow demolish a flat Earth. Obviously, they don't prove a flat Earth in any way, but they clearly don't demolish any argument because that's part of the argument. I mean, that if it's a planetarium, clearly there would be lights in the sky. So that's part of the flat Earth argument. So how is it destroying that argument? I mean, his fundamental failure to even comprehend Flat Earth Dave's arguments. I don't get how he's not this embarrassed. Does he have some kind of psychological condition where he gets a kick out of looking stupid and embarrassing himself? I mean, there's all kinds of people out there. I mean, if he actually gets a kick out of humiliating himself here, getting obliterated by a flat earther, of all people, so-called Professor Dave is just getting absolutely annihilated by a flat earther. And Flat Earth Dave's points aren't even that good. I mean, he's able to avoid most logical fallacies, but that doesn't mean he's proving the Earth is flat in any way. And this Professor Dave goof is still getting obliterated by this guy. I mean, this is absolutely embarrassing. I kind of feel bad for Professor Dave being this humiliated by a flat earther. So, I mean, what do we call that? Like a non sequitur, a straw man, an ad hom? I mean, he just rolled them all in.
Well, you say that, but the lights in the sky have nothing to do with the flat Earth.
Okay, so this was my first talking point. Were we going to do the talking points that we prepared? Because my first talking point is about this, and it is an absolute annihilation of flat Earth. That's why you don't want to talk about it. That's why you say, why do we look at the things in the sky to figure out the shape of the Earth? Because that's how we figured it out 2,000 years ago, by looking at the stars.
So this is a circular reasoning logical fallacy rolled into a reification logical fallacy, rolled into an appeal to authority logical fallacy, claiming that these other people, they're the authorities, they figured it out, therefore it should be true. I mean, I gotta hand it to him. It's impressive how many back-to-back, I mean, he's got nothing but logical fallacies. And the rapid succession fire of it, just fallacy stacked on top of each other. It's impressive. I don't think I've ever seen anybody argue this fallaciously as Professor Dave did here. So we got to give him credit here. I mean, this might be the most logically fallacious so-called argument ever even mounted in any kind of debate.
Can I show my slide that shows this?
Go for it.
Okay, here we go. Observation of the stars. Next one. You're controlling it, right? Do I just tell you when to go? Okay, so if you're in the northern hemisphere looking at the North Pole, then hang on, all this stuff is covering. I can't even see the text. I think I remember what it says. Anyway, if you're looking at the North Pole in the northern hemisphere, the stars rotate counterclockwise. Go to the next one. If you were in the southern hemisphere looking at the South Pole, the stars rotate clockwise. Next one.
This is an excellent example, again, of a false cause logical fallacy, as if there's only a single explanation and it has to be this. I mean, false dichotomy, false cause. I mean, and in a way, you could also claim it is a reductive logical fallacy. as in oversimplification, like this is that simple that this is the only way this could happen and there will never be any other variables. For example, another parallel here is the alleged Coriolis effect. Which way does the water in a toilet bowl go down? Obviously, it depends on the design of the toilet bowl. You could have two different bowl designs and one will go counterclockwise, one will go counterclockwise in your same house, regardless of where on earth you are. So, I mean, this logical fallacy stack, I mean, it is kind of impressive. I can't lie. I am impressed by Professor Dave's cluelessness and his ability to stack so many logical fallacies inside single arguments. I mean, it's impressive. It's impressive.
How does this make sense on a flat earth? Sorry, this is a screenshot from one of my videos. So in the video, they're rotating in different directions. Why would two people on a flat pizza land look at the sky and see a sky that is rotating in different ways? Next one.
Okay, so this is actually an interesting point. I don't think I've addressed this in previous podcasts. So this is what a lot of so-called heliocentric globe earthers believe is a smoking gun on the rotation, the appearance of clockwise versus counterclockwise rotation, depending on whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. Now, just to lay the groundwork for this concept, I don't know, a lot of people have done this, but just the way perspective works regarding things that are spinning around a singular point. So if you're in an office chair with wheels, point at, go underneath your, go straight underneath your light bulb in your room. Now look up at the light bulb while you're spinning to the right. So spin clockwise in your office chair and point to the light bulb above you and observe whether you're going clockwise or counterclockwise around your finger pointing at the light bulb. Then look down, point a spot at the floor. You could, if you want to make it easier, you could put an object or whatever, a bottle cap, a small piece of whatever, a quarter on the floor right underneath and between your feet. Point at it while you're spinning in your chair, and you're still spinning to the right clockwise, and see which way it looks, and then compare. So you're spinning in the same direction, but whether you're looking up or down, it appears to be rotating a different direction, one of those two, correct? So it's, again, he's claiming, he's falling for all these logical fallacies, like the reductive fallacy of oversimplification, as if it can only happen one way. So the other thing to note, if for people with more time on their hands, you can go into the program Stellarium and observe this effect of the appearance of rotation. So if, again, I'm not claiming this is true, but if we are in a type of planetarium, regardless of the shape of the Earth, the way the stars rotate above, depending on the distances, the axes, the speed of rotation, things would appear to rotate a certain way versus another way, and you can position yourself different spots of the Earth to observe the appearance of the sky. Anyone interested in the way that this could theoretically work? Now, a point against the heliocentric globe model is there wouldn't be star trails around the North Pole. Why would the star trails be perfect circles rotating around the North Pole if the Earth is flying through space and our Milky Way galaxy is flying through space, and then all the other galaxies are magically flying in all these different directions? Again, I'm not saying that's not happening, but you would need a better explanation than billions of years light takes to travel. I mean, that kind of magical explanation, billions of years. I mean, that's kind of used for evolution as well. That's not proof. Saying something, again, the burden of proof is not met there. Saying something's going to take forever, therefore the theory is true. I mean, that's obviously silly nonsense. The theory might be true, but you can't prove it by saying, magically millions of years. I mean, that kind of silly nonsense, that's not scientific. You have to observe and measure, not hallucinate and default to blind faith. Let's continue here. Now, this is probably his dumbest argument yet.
And furthermore, why can't we all see the same stars? There are stars that you can only see in the northern towards the northern hemisphere, and stars you can only see in the southern hemisphere. Next one.
All right, so that leads me to believe, I mean, is it possible that Professor Dave is just this dumb he hasn't looked at a single flat earth argument? I mean, this is such a common one. I mean, if you're in a giant warehouse and you put up a certain light bulbs and then you go hundreds of miles and put different color light bulbs in different positions, obviously you wouldn't see the light bulb. This is the goofery of some of these clueless heliocentric globe debaters. They're trying to plug in the parameters of distance and everything into the flat earth model, but the flat earth model does not include those parameters. So that's a straw man logical fallacy as well, and also a non sequitur, because I mean, this is just nonsense. In the flat earth model, true or untrue, you wouldn't see the same stars from everywhere in the earth if the stars are relatively close. I mean, again, it's just like the warehouse example. And some people also bring up the angle of the moon. Like if you tape a picture of a smiley face to your ceiling, walk from one end of your living room to the other end of the living room, the smiley face will be upside down. That doesn't mean you're on a globe. I mean, these are very simple children's level experiments you can do to clearly show how goofy Professor Dave's arguments are here. I mean, this is children's level stuff that he doesn't understand. Now, again, is he just mentally disabled, or does he get a kick out of embarrassing himself this severely?
On a globe, this makes perfect sense. If you're in the northern hemisphere looking at the North Pole, east is to your right. If you are in the southern hemisphere looking at the South Pole, east is to your left. Next one.
Again, reductive logical fallacy, false dichotomy logical fallacy, straw man logical fallacy, trying to plug in these things to the flat earth model that they do not claim.
And the reason we can't see certain stars is because you can't see through the earth. Next one.
Ditto for everything I just said before.
That's why in the northern hemisphere we can't see the Southern Cross. That's why in the southern hemisphere we can't see Polaris. Next one.
Which would work exactly the same way on a flat plane. I mean, it's hard to believe he's this dumb. I mean, he's got to be playing stupid, right?
Almost done. Quick one here. So it actually gets a lot worse than that in the southern hemisphere, because you've taken a globe and you've unwrapped it. The southern hemisphere makes absolutely no sense. People in the southern hemisphere who are all looking at the Southern Cross are somehow supposed to be, we're believing that they're all looking in completely different directions and seeing the same object, often at the same time. Next one.
Well, he's also presupposing those distances are what they are. Again, that's where there could be some issues with stellarium, because, again, burden of proof. I don't know if the flat earthers are claiming the distances between the continents are the same. I mean, I don't know what they're claiming here, but Professor Dave is straw manning, because look at his whole diagram is a straw man in terms of distances.
It might be that because Ash is doing this. Oh, has he done it? Has it worked?
Yeah, that's it. I think this is the last one. So again, on a globe, south actually means something. People who are looking south are all looking at the South Pole. They're all looking in the same direction, so that's why they all see the same thing, such as an object like the Southern Cross.
All right, can you go
I
back
think
to
that's the last one.
So again, if Professor Dave was interested in good faith logical debate, he would at least examine the argument for the Southern Cross and the theory that if this is some kind of a projection planetarium, what would the actual rotation of the Southern Cross be? Like, what are the axes and distances? Because if you don't have that information, you can't just hallucinate and pretend it's only this point over this point and try to plug in the variables of the heliocentric globe theory, plug it into the flat earth theory, and use that to disprove the flat earth theory. That's the ultimate straw man. And again, the reductive logical fallacy, because he's assuming that there's no other way that you would see that except on a globe model. I mean, again, this kind of silliness is just getting really painful.
Let me go through the
Just
slides.
Check if it's the next one.
Yeah.
Check if it's the last one.
And if you can go back to the first one, that would be great. So in your world, we have people standing upside down, and you're assuming hemispheres on a sphere.
What do you mean upside down? What do you mean upside down? What does that mean?
Compare their feet are antipodal to my feet, people in the South.
Okay, so yours are upside down compared to them. What's the difference? What's down on a globe?
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah, he's not saying there's a difference. So I don't know what would this be classified as. This would kind of be a red herring logical fallacy, because he's kind of trying to frame it as if Flat Earth Dave is saying that they're wrong or upside down. Obviously, if the globe theory is true, then who in the north it would be opposite. So the other people would be upside down. Obviously, this is all obvious, and yet Professor Dave wants to red herring it for whatever reason. I mean, again, just trying to embarrass himself as much as possible. Or the other thing I kind of noticed, he doesn't want to let Flat Earth Dave speak, so he always wants to interject as often as possible. So Flat Earth Dave can't actually expand upon his points in any way. So obviously this is not a good faith debate in any way, but it does help Professor Dave set the world record for most logical fallacies in the least amount of time.
People are upside down to each other halfway across the world. So if we can go back to the original slide so I can remember all the points he made so I can address them, that would be fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know what Flat Earth Dave is saying there. People are upside down. I mean, never thought I'd say this. I'm going to have to agree with Professor Dave here. So on a heliocentric globe, they would be upside down. And so what? I mean, I don't know what Flat Earth Dave's trying to do here. He's trying to clarify a point. I mean, he's not actually making a claim. He's trying to clarify the globe Earth model, so it's technically not a fallacy. But my next question as well is, so, like, where are you going with that?
I think the issue is that Ash, the producer, is having some issues with his internet and isn't able to do it. Sorry about this, guys. We're usually quite good with the tech and everything.
So,
yeah,
I'll try to.
I can tell you the points again.
I'd rather just see the points rather than hear you say them again.
Okay.
I don't know. He can't change it back.
I don't think so. He's in the Philippines or something mad like that. So he's having some difficulties with it. And I think Sean is as well. Good thing I'm here, saving the day.
Okay, look,
but yeah,
it was that in the northern hemisphere, the celestial sphere rotates counterclockwise. In the southern hemisphere, it rotates clockwise.
Let me respond.
And we can't see certain stars.
You don't have to do the whole presentation. You can just remind me.
That was it. Go ahead.
So no matter where you are in the world, all of the stars, all the lights in the sky from things that we call planets, wandering stars, sun and moon, they all rise in the east, set in the west. If I'm standing on a flat Earth looking out to the south, the stars are coming from my left. If I'm standing in the north, looking at the north, the stars are coming from my right. That explains the opposite direction.
No, you just explained the globe model. You didn't explain anything.
You don't understand.
On the flat Earth, how do people see the sky rotating in different directions?
Because
Explain
you're
that.
facing in different directions, David.
I mean, he really should have brought up the example, like even just spinning in your chair, looking down versus up. It appears that there's a rotation one way versus the other way. Now, to be fair, Flat Earth Dave does not explain this very well. But on the other hand, Professor Dave should know the basics of perspective, which he either does not. Either he has some kind of mental disability, can't grasp the children's level of basics, or he's playing stupid and intentionally trying to appear as stupid as possible. I don't know which, of course.
If all facing in different directions.
I will explain. If I'm
wait, hang on. Speaking of facing in different directions, Flat Earth Dave, because we've changed the angles a bit, you're a bit off the screen. That's it. You look
I
good
got
now.
it. It would be better if you can make me widescreen so I can show what I'm showing. But
okay, well there you go. And I'll just say, Sean's just saying that his thing is freezing, so I guess he'll be back when he can. But for now, you keep going.
So on a flat Earth, if you have a flat Earth, north is to the center, south is every direction away from the center. So if the stars are going this way from my right shoulder to left shoulder, I'm looking at the North Star, they're going one way. When I turn around and I look at the south away from the center, they're coming from my left shoulder to my right shoulder. They just changed directions. Okay, there's no argument there. There's nothing to argue. That works.
Okay, now do clockwise and counterclockwise.
Well,
because that's really what we're talking about. What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Again,
you're
David,
talking about a direction. I'm talking about clockwise versus counterclockwise when you're looking at the poles.
David, the optics of the sky.
Well, so now he's presupposing that there are poles. See, again, he's trying to plug in the variables of the heliocentric globe, which Flat Earth Dave does not believe in. He does not believe there's a South Pole. So again, this utter failure of Professor Dave to understand even basic rudimentary flat Earth theory, and yet he's debating on it, I mean, this level of cluelessness, I mean, it really is something else. It's just something else. Again, he's just stacking all these fallacies.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, you say the polls. So getting back to your point where you have somebody in Santiago, somebody in Johannesburg, and somebody in Australia, when they see the Southern Cross, well, they don't see it at the same time. They see it 12 hours apart from
They
Santiago.
don't see it at the same time, so people
wait,
looking south can't see the night sky at the same time.
David, if you
Mhm.
understand what the flat Earth model is, if somebody's in Santiago,
You don't have a model.
Well, he clearly has a model. Might not be true. So this level of straw manning, non sequiturs, ad hom attacks, I mean, it's just the stacks are just so crazy. I'm going to let this play for a little bit more because this is going to take forever if I keep calling out each one. So I'm just going to put it on the counter. I think everybody's kind of got an idea of all the different fallacies, and they'll be able to see who commits what.
listen,
Yeah.
stop being a dick. Okay.
You stop being a dick.
If some-
Your entire existence is being a dick to
Hey.
all of science. So stop telling me to stop being a dick.
Keep going.
Mhm.
So somebody's in Santiago and it's midnight. They're looking at the Southern Cross. Well, somebody in Australia that's looking south, they're looking at the noon sun. You tell me how they can
Noon
see the
sun?
star-
How
the
many?
noon sun.
How many time zones apart are they? Are they 12 time zones apart?
Well, at noon, close to noon, right?
Okay, no, first of all, not close to noon, but it doesn't matter. How about you go 4 hours apart? Why don't you go 4 time zones apart? They should still be looking in completely different directions. 12 midnight, 4 a.m., night sky, both looking south, both can see the Southern Cross. On your pizza world should be looking in completely different directions. Explain that.
Dave, when the only time that can happen is in Johannesburg and Santiago, and if you add magnetic declination in there, they're both looking in the same direction.
Magnetic declination.
Yeah.
So you think just saying the word magnet is going to be an argument here that's going to work for you?
So that's funny because whenever the flat earthers call this out for the heliocentric globers always say, oh, because of gravity. And now Professor Dave is saying, oh, well, you can't just say magnetic declination. That doesn't prove anything, as if it's true the same way the goof mentions gravity. But let's get a little bit into magnetic declination. So this is right from NOAA, National Center for Environmental Information. Magnetic declination, sometimes called magnetic variation, is the angle between magnetic north and true north. Declination is positive east of true north and negative when west. Magnetic declination changes over time and with location. As the compass points with local magnetic fields, declination value is needed to obtain true north. So, depending, again, there's a lot of different theories at play. If electromagnetism is the primary force that we're dealing with, and if there is some kind of a projection system on the dome, if there is a dome, if the flat earth model is true, then without knowing the exact variables of this projection and how it would be affected by magnetic declination as well as electromagnetism and all these other things to obtain the true path, because Professor Dave is of course trying to plug in the distances and variables in the heliocentric globe model of all the constellations and all that into Dave's flat earth model, which does not include those pieces. So his straw man, I mean, he's definitely the king of straw manning because he's pretending all of these variables would fit. And now notice how he interrupted flat earth. He didn't even let him explain how magnetic, because when Professor Dave speaks, he just says the terms and then never backs them up. Flat earth Dave, I don't know if he's going to back it up or not. He's in the middle of making his point, and Professor Dave can only interrupt like a clueless goof. I mean, I guess, is he that triggered, or is he just that much of a troll playing this level of stupid because he gets a kick out of embarrassing himself?
Look up the magnetic declinations of those areas. You don't know what direction you're facing, right? There's certain areas of Antarctica that the magnetic declination is 170 degrees. So when your compass says north is that way, it's 170 degrees the other way, according to, NOAA or whoever's in charge of that, right?
Look, you can dress it up however you want. We're talking about looking this way and looking that way, and they see the same thing.
Well, again, so now we're into burden of proof, logical fallacy, because, well, also red herring, because he's claiming you would know which way you were looking. So which model are you on? Because you would have to prove, like the burden of proof, he's saying Professor Dave's making the claim that they're looking this way or that way, they would have to, relative to what? Because on the flat Earth model, obviously, that's not the same as the heliocentric globe model. Again, these are children's level basics, but Professor Dave just can't grasp it.
And you're fixating on Santiago and Johannesburg because you think that they're far enough apart that they're not going to both be nighttime. I'm telling you, you can go any distance apart. Just go from Perth to Sydney.
What do you mean any distance? How are those distances verified? Because if the flat earthers are claiming that those distances on the globe between those areas are not the actual distances, then how would any of this be proven? Again, a fundamental lack of understanding of the burden of proof, logical fallacy.
Right? That's far enough apart that if you're both looking directly south, you're looking in different directions.
And he's also kind of stacking on the circular reasoning logical fallacy to that as well.
And you can see the same thing. You cannot explain that. That's why you're trying to throw out jargon to confuse people.
Oh, that's another straw man. He clearly defined it. And so if Professor Dave doesn't know what magnetic declination is and how it would affect the appearance of the constellations in the sky relative to position, he should not be discussing the subject, of course.
I'm not trying to throw out jargon to confuse people, David.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Another straw man and ad hom.
When you're looking towards the same area. You're looking towards the same area. And
but on your pizza world, south is a different direction for every longitude line. Do you not understand that? On your pizza land, right, you have all these longitude lines. Directly south is towards your magic ice wall. Everybody looking south is looking in a different direction.
Magic ice wall.
Yeah. So stop trying to skip to something else, right? Are you denying that longitude lines, everybody on your pizza world is all looking in a completely different direction when they look south?
And NASA or NOAA, they tell us, what longitude lines you're talking about. They tell us that the magnetic declination is a different direction. So,
I mean, it's weird. I mean, can Professor Dave be this dumb that he doesn't understand that the flat Earth model does not include those same lines at those same distances? Now, to be fair, I don't know if Flat Earth Dave or any other Flat Earther is giving a positive claim onto what those distances actually are. I mean, you would need to do that in order to support the claim that the Earth is flat. But that doesn't change just the logical fallacy records here of Professor Dave.
we're listening.
Do they, or are you just randomly grasping at words to try to make sense of something that is absolutely unexplainable for you?
Solid psychological projection there by Professor Dave. Again, his fundamental lack of being able to grasp even the basics of flat Earth theory.
David, it's not true. And the optics in the sky, again, do not prove the shape of the Earth. You say that they do.
Well, I just did prove it with that.
How? He just... How is a reductive logical fallacy is not proof of anything?
So I don't know what to tell you.
Let's move on.
So is that his way of saying he doesn't know how to debate without using logical fallacies? I mean, that is true. I mean, all we've seen is logical fallacy.
So I'm sorry, guys.
Do you want to move on?
My entire
from
system
this thing?
crashed.
I want to move on from looking at the lights in the sky to figure out. Yeah, we hear you.
Because I proved the Earth is a sphere by using that.
How so? Circular reasoning logical fallacy.
Is that why you want to move on?
No, not at all.
Well,
We hear you. We don't care.
It is.
What talking point?
We hear you, but we don't care.
What talking point are we on right now?
I just finished proving the Earth is a sphere by looking at stars, something that we've been doing for thousands of years.
Okay, so what is that? Appeal to popularity, appeal to authority, reification fallacy, circular reasoning logical fallacy, and reductive logical fallacy. Man, Professor Dave is really good at just rattling off fallacies and hallucinating they somehow prove something.
Yeah, so says you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and everybody who's ever lived.
Appeal to extremes and appeal to authority and appeal to popularity all rolled into one.
So NASA isn't going to really help you with that one. Sorry, buddy. They started in the 1950s.
Another straw man because Flat Earth Dave never claimed it was only NASA or whatever.
All right, so we've got a talking point from Dave, which is The Bible has 200 references to the flat Earth. Every major ancient civilization cosmology depicts the Earth as flat.
That's from me or from Dave?
That is
I would
from
never say
you,
that.
I think.
That's not from me. That's not from me.
It's from Ash. It's from Ash.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Bible believer, you know, from page 1 in the Bible, it says God separated the waters from the waters and created the firmament. That's all interesting, but you know, I don't use the Bible as science because science will show us on a ball Earth, Dave.
Yep.
You have to have a physical horizon, right? If my fingernail is a boat, as it goes away, it disappears below a physical horizon, and zooming in will not bring it back. However, we can see too far. They say the ball is 24,901 miles around, but we can see things that are way, way, way farther. And with infrared, now we're seeing things 500 to 1,000 miles away. The amount of curvature.
No, you're not.
I know, yeah, we are.
You're not.
Wow, so flat out denial. Okay, lying. I mean, you have to hand it to Professor Dave. In addition to being a master of logical fallacies, particularly the straw man, he's also a pretty good master of psychological projection. I mean, quite accurate. I mean, what are we going to rope this I mean, this is technically would probably be personal incredulity logical fallacy because he can't believe it's true. So he's saying, oh, no, you're not. It's not true.
Go look at Jay Tolan Media's channel.
Oh,
It's
go
amazing.
look at some lies that a flat earther said. That is real evidence.
No,
So that would be a genetic logical fallacy and an ad hom. Man, Professor Dave's on a roll. Just fallacy, 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 fallacy. I mean, this has got to be the world record for most fallacies in a single debate in the least amount of time.
Sure.
It's Dave. It's well documented. You haven't looked at it. And then when you say the curvature formula is a parabola, I absolutely agree. It is. Over 1,000 miles, it gets off a little bit, but anything under 1,000 miles, all three formulas come within a very close proximity of each other.
Yeah,
right?
but the problem is you can't do math, so you just do the math wrong.
Okay, so that's an ad hom and a straw man logical fallacy because he didn't even examine the math and he's claiming it is wrong.
Well, you just say that, but if you look at all of the curvature formulas under 1,000 miles, it's perfectly accurate. And then you think that we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and we don't feel it, and we're changing, you know, we're changing directions. How is that possible? How about when the Earth comes around comes around towards the sun in the winter, in our northern winter, it's speeding up and taking its sharpest turn, and then we don't feel any of those forces?
Its sharpest turn. Okay, so this one's really hilarious to me. So the sun goes around the Earth, or sorry, the Earth goes around the sun in how long? How long does it take?
A year.
A year, right? So why don't you go ahead and get in a car and do a 360 turn and make it take a year? Are you going to feel that?
Dave, that's not a
Let's
fair...
break it down. 360 degrees, 365 days, that's about a degree a year, right? Why don't you get in a car and drive for 24 hours and over 24 hours veer by 1 degree? Are you going to feel that?
Okay, this guy actually seems genuine, so I think I'm going to have to lean towards mental disability. So this is a false analogy or a non-congruent logical fallacy. Again, Professor Dave is starting to get a little bit more diverse with his logical fallacies here. So obviously, one single motion over a period of time is non-congruent to the claimed motions of the Earth, because there's a claimed 1,000 mile per hour spin on the axis, then there's the claimed movement around the sun, then there's the claimed movement of the entire Milky Way galaxy. So these are all multiple points of direction, not a single point.
That would be equivalent to this. People say, "Oh, I'm just trying to think of the easiest way."
I'm just trying to think of something to say
Hey,
that
Dave,
will make sense.
Stop being a dick. Right? Imagine you want to compare that.
Man.
If you want to compare that to reality, imagine you're in an airplane where you remove the outer shell of the airplane, you double the speed of the airplane, and you nosedive 2 miles a minute. Okay, and that just to follow the curve of the Earth. That's the speed that the Earth is curving. And when something's moving and it's curving, that's acceleration. Okay, so
big words.
So that was a red herring. I'm going to count that as a red herring for Flat Earth Dave here, because that doesn't specifically address the multiple motions or the time of the motion. He kind of changed the argument on moving vertically, whereas the previous argument was moving horizontally.
Acceleration's a big word.
You know, well, when it is for you because you're not using it properly.
How is he not using it properly? So, I mean, this would basically be an ad hom, as if he's too stupid to know the right definition, so he's not using it properly without showing how he's not using it properly.
So,
acceleration is rate of change in velocity. So you're using it like it's
when
velocity.
you change
So
off
you don't
of
know
your
what
vector,
acceleration
when
means.
you change off of your vector, that force is equal to acceleration. Okay.
Yeah, but I just told you,
don't-
right? It takes a year to go around the sun. What?
So-
How much are you feeling? Do you want to calculate it? Should we
Dave,
calculate it
I'm
together?
talking about the spin of the Earth. The
Okay.
spin of the Earth. The spin of the Earth. Right? You're
The
dropping
spin of the Earth is constant.
2 miles
We do
a
not
minute.
feel.
You're falling, like if you take a point in space and you go for an hour, you're falling at the same rate as a skydiver free falling. Okay, that's ridiculous, right? You are
Yeah,
curving
see-
off of your line of your trajectory.
So that's an appeal to incredulity by Flat Earth Dave there. Just because it's ridiculous doesn't mean it's not true. Now, he does mix in some examples, but unless he does so here, this is a fallacy for him.
This one I think I figured out, and I think this one is genuine confusion on your part. So I don't want to hold this one against you as much as other lies you tell, which are just blatant lies.
The psychological projection off the chart, another ad hom there. And a straw man, too, because he's basically alleging that Dave is intentionally lying and doing all these things.
This one is just you not understanding. You're trying to compare motion within the atmosphere of the Earth. So you're like, oh my gosh, something going through the atmosphere so fast and it's crazy and we feel it, versus motion in frictionless space. Do you not understand that that's not the same thing? Right? The atmosphere on Earth is very thick. There's a lot of friction. Right? So when you try to move through air, there's friction and you
Doesn't
feel
matter.
it.
So that's a red herring on the part of so-called Professor Dave, because that's not really relevant. Like, whether you would feel it or not, either it's happening or it's not happening. Because, I mean, that was a fallacious point from Flat Earth Dave, saying it's ridiculous. That's an appeal to incredulity right there. But this is clearly a red herring, and also burden of proof if he's going to claim that something is frictionless versus not frictionless, and a space has whatever, the atmosphere is here, not there. I mean, again, these are things that need to be proven, which he has not done. And you could also, that's also circular reasoning, logical fallacy, technically.
It doesn't matter.
What do you
if that
mean it
air
doesn't
is-
matter?
If that air is spinning with the Earth, which you have to believe in your model, you would feel
Doesn't matter.
You would feel that motion. If you're in an airplane,
Why would you feel the motion? Why
because
would
you're
you feel the motion?
Because your energy is changing directions, and you would
Your
have a
energy
force.
is changing
No, wait,
directions.
What about eclipses, guys? What about
hold on.
eclipses?
Hold on.
That's
Let-
my
let's-
third
gotta-
talking point. I hope we get to it.
Let's finish this point. Your mainstream science says that because of the spin of the Earth, because of the centrifugal force, that the water bulges at the equator 14 miles high.
What?
This is what Neil deGrasse Tyson and science tells us about the spin of the Earth. The water
No, it
at the
doesn't.
equator, yes, it does. It
it
bulges 14
doesn't.
miles high.
He actually did say that. So this just denial of, I mean, what would you even place this in?
The tide doesn't actually come in and out. There is a bulge of water, two of them, on opposite sides of the Earth, caused by the sun and the moon. And Earth turns inside that bulge. When we say the water rises and falls tidally, what's happening is we are rotating into the bulge and then out of the bulge.
So the bulge is already
It's
there.
already there.
And all we kind of do is pass through the
Pass
bulge.
through, and the water gets high and it gets low.
So that's the clip there from Neil deGrasse Tyson here. And of course, Professor Dave is so clueless, he doesn't even know about the equatorial bulge. That's his own model that he's defending on blind faith and logical fallacies. So this goof, he's so clueless and triggered like a small child. He hears something he doesn't think is true. Oh, no, that's not true. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Like a small child denying what they're ignorant of. So another appeal to incredulity, logical fallacy. I mean, this is world record stuff here.
It makes the Earth 29 miles wider at the equator.
No. That's the Earth, not the water.
There is a bulge of water.
What are you talking about?
There is a bulge of water.
Are you a moron?
There is a bulge of water,
Dude, the radius. This is what happened. You're very confused.
So let me ask you a question,
no, stop, because you just said a very specific number, and I know why you said that number. The diameter of the Earth is about 27 miles greater at the equator. That's the whole Earth. You're trying to pretend that it's all water, that there's just this big thing of water that's 14 miles. Is that what you're genuinely trying to say? Are you that stupid?
There is a bulge of water.
What a goof.
Well, that's what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. But
No, he didn't say that.
There is a bulge of water.
No, he didn't say that.
There is a bulge of water.
Go with you. I'll go with you. The Earth is bulging. So does that mean that large bodies of water at rest near the equator, if you hung a plumb line over it, that it wouldn't be perpendicular to the surface of the water? It would be off just a little bit because of that bulge? Or does gravity? Well,
what does the bulge of the equator have to do with the water?
There is a bulge of water, two of them, on opposite sides of the Earth.
Well, because the gravity pulls everything to the center of the Earth in your whole world.
Does Professor Dave not know that there's water, that there's oceans? I mean, his argument here, it's making it seem like he's not aware that the ocean is on the Earth, so therefore the any kind of bulge would affect the water because, I mean, the Earth is mostly water according to his mind. I mean, this level of cluelessness, I mean, this truly is record-breaking.
And if we have a bulge at the equator, a plumb line, which should be vertical, it should be perpendicular to the water, would not be perpendicular to the water because the water would be sloping away because we have a bulge.
What do you mean sloping away? Okay, a bulge isn't. First of all, as I just said, this has nothing to do with the water.
There is a bulge of water, two of them, on opposite sides of the Earth.
It's the shape of the Earth itself, so you're just completely wrong anyway.
There is a bulge of water, two of them, on opposite sides of the Earth.
But second of all, what this is the thing with you guys. You think that the curvature of the Earth is supposed to be, you're talking about a plumb line. Do you think that the curvature of the Earth is supposed to be like this or something? Do you have no idea how big the Earth is? Do you not understand that the curvature is not detectable at the surface of the Earth?
I mean, it's not detectable, yet he's claiming that a ship would disappear over the edge if that's what he's claiming, unless he doesn't claim that. But he claimed that the other guy doesn't know math because he doesn't understand any of these arguments. So the psychological projection just off the charts here. He doesn't understand any of it, yet he continues to argue.
It's really big. It's a really big planet.
We can see boats go over the horizon. We can see boats go over the horizon, but we can't see the curve, right? Dave, according to your math, there's certain things that should be behind a curve at certain distances, but we can see too far.
But we can't. You just lie about them.
Who's the one that just said you can't detect it?
You just said earlier that we can see things 1,000 miles away. Are you out of your mind? Everybody should be able to take a telescope then and see something 1,000 miles away. Why can't they?
Oh, that's a great argument. So this goof doesn't know about the visibility index. So he just did, he just stacked a few more logical fallacies there, the false dichotomy. Either if the Earth is flat, you see forever. There's just no such thing as precipitation. There's no such thing as rain or any precipitation. There's no such thing as a visibility index. I mean, this level of goofery. And again, an argument from a reductive logical fallacy here, assuming there wouldn't be other variables like precipitation, which is obviously true. I mean, he's never heard of fog? I mean, what kind of goofery is this?
Dave, you don't know where it was taking it from. It's infrared cameras. Go look at JTOL and Media One and watch all of the.
He's the special one. He can do it. Nobody else can do it.
Actually,
Nobody else can get this footage.
So,
but they don't.
Dave, let me ask you a
question. They just don't because they don't feel like it.
Is
Strawman, genetic logical fallacy. There's a whole bunch of infrared footage. There's infrared footage from planes, etc., etc. But he's so busy interrupting, trying to set the world record for logical fallacies that, or again, if he just gets a kick out of making himself look this stupid and embarrassing himself to this level, I mean, bravo, because he accomplished that.
Do you believe that the ground is horizontal?
It's almost perfectly horizontal, yes.
Okay, are horizontals parallel?
If you
Are horizontals parallel? That's a question.
I think what you're trying to ask is if you have parallel planes, right? If you have two flat planes, can they be made parallel? Yes, two flat planes can
That's
be
not what
made
I'm saying.
parallel. Well, what are you saying? Because nobody has
what
any
I'm
clue
saying
what you're
is-
saying.
If you have a horizontal line on Earth, then there's only one point that would be touching the Earth, and the rest would just rise up into space. But all horizontal lines line up with the horizontal horizon. Okay, they're all parallel.
Yeah, do they, or do they just look like that because your eyes suck and they can't distinguish between arc seconds of angle?
Oh, okay. So maybe he's not mentally disabled. So he's just intellectually dishonest because all of a sudden, he's claiming what you see might not be true. So the hypocrisy off the charts here, because earlier you look through a telescope, something looks round, all of a sudden it has to be a sphere because it looks like it. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to parallel lines in the distance, all of a sudden he's saying your eyes suck and it might not look the way it is. So he's not mentally disabled. So this is all an act of just playing stupid in an intellectually dishonest fashion. Well, at least we have evidence of that now.
All right. Well, let me phrase it
Looking
this way.
like it perfectly overlaps doesn't mean that it perfectly overlaps.
Only
Hey,
got
Right?
10
Just because
minutes
the
left.
horizon
Only
looks
10
flat
10
doesn't
minutes
mean
left.
it's perfectly
10
flat.
minutes left, guys, to move on to eclipses.
10 minutes left. I didn't even get to do I did one of my things.
Maybe he shouldn't interrupt so much then. Because Flat Earth Dave could have made his points a lot quicker without the 50 million interruptions per point.
It could be 13 minutes.
Well, my question is, the
let's
top
move
of
on
the
to
World Trade
eclipses.
Towers, when they were up, are those floors larger than the lower floors? Because for them to be perpendicular, they would have to get larger, right?
How far apart were they?
What? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't know what Flat Earth Dave is getting at there. I mean, we're going to have to go false cause on that one because I don't see the relationship there. I mean, he didn't explain that at all. Maybe he's got a point to it, but as of yet, unexplained points, false cause for Flat Earth Dave there.
How far apart were the towers?
I don't know, but I'm asking you about one tower.
Okay, but it doesn't matter. Look, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the distance between the towers or the width of a tower. Do you know how much curvature there is over such a small distance? It is so small that it is 100% negligible. What are you not understanding about that?
So that's appeal to extremes. And also, he's claiming it's negligible. I mean, that's... I'm going to give him a little bit of a break here because at least it looks like he's attempting to at least do some kind of an argument instead of just constant ad homs.
The Earth is really big.
So do you believe that horizontal lines are parallel?
If you make them parallel, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about horizontal lines on Earth. When you're, surveying the land and you have a horizontal line, another one, another one, another one, are they parallel?
If you make them parallel, they're not lines, right? They're not actual lines. Do you know that lines are just approximations, right? We can draw lines, we can graph lines and do math in perfect Euclidean geometry. The Earth has a spherical surface. So yeah, we can go, that's a line and that's a line. And if we're just looking at less than a mile, yeah, it looks really straight.
But he's not talking about less than a mile. Flat Earth Dave is specifically talking about 1,000 miles. So this would be a red herring as well, and a circular reasoning, a logical fallacy.
But it's not, because the Earth is a sphere.
And even a straw man, because Dave is not alleging that.
So you're not comprehending scale. That's the problem.
Anybody
And perfect psychological projection there as well.
measured curvature in large body of water at rest? Large body of water needs a container to hold it in place. And has anyone measured any curvature on resting water? And don't tell me your drop and your wave, which is in your stupid video that got 10 million views.
Drop and wave? I don't even know what you're talking about.
You talked about water curves. And you showed a drop of water.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no, I know what you're talking about.
That is just a complete straw man.
Well,
nonsense.
it's not, but actually, this is what's funniest to me is that you're flat Earth, you debunk yourself with this level water thing, because the funny thing is that, so tides exist, right? And so on your little pizza world, tides are these little mounds of water that kind of travel around. I don't really know how else you're going to explain this, but right, tides exist, right?
Yeah, they do, but they don't correlate to the sun and the moon. There's
Stop.
no,
Stop.
So, Flat Earth Dave is demonstrating how he's strawmanning, and he's desperate to get him to stop exposing his own cluelessness, Professor Dave's cluelessness here. He gets so triggered to say, stop, don't expose my cluelessness.
Stop. No sun and the moon. No sun and moon. There are the water levels go up and down, right? And in different places, not everywhere at the same time, right?
Yeah,
so
but
on your little pizza world, you've got a little hold on. You've got a little mound of water that's just kind of traveling around. So I'm sorry, but water isn't level on your pizza world either.
Dave, what causes your high tides? The moon?
What causes tides? The moon and well, there's solar tides and there's lunar tides.
Right. And so when there's a new moon, which means the sun and the moon are on the same side of the earth, the tide should be bigger, but there's not. There's bigger tides when they're opposing.
It is.
No, they're not.
No, it is.
You're absolutely wrong.
No, I'm not. And you can Google it right now. What are you talking about? When the solar and lunar tides align, that's the highest tide.
Right, guys.
You're just saying it's not because you're just lying.
Is that psychological projection?
I'm being pushed by Ash to move on to day/night regions of illumination.
Okay.
Right. What does that mean?
Oh well, that's my second thing. I can try. I'll do it super fast. I'll do it as fast as possible.
Go on. Do you need him to put the thing up?
Yeah.
Yeah, he might not be able to do that. Sean, what are you thinking?
The system has crashed. That's why I got kicked off.
I mean, I can try to. I mean, you kind of need the visual, but I mean, I'll wing it if you guys want.
Please wing
it. We're not going to get the slides.
So.
Okay, so
sorry about that.
So this is the funny thing about your pizza world is that in the northern hemisphere things are kind of okay, not really, but in the southern hemisphere it all goes to crap. And so to try to explain night and day and seasons, which you absolutely cannot do, you try to make the sun go way out towards the bottom, and you think that works because it makes it the longer nights, right, up in the north. But the problem is in the southern hemisphere everything is terrible because you've got the sun way out towards the edge. And therefore, it shouldn't be able to illuminate very much of the Earth. But in the southern hemisphere, in like December and January, you've got regions like towards the southern ends of those continents that are almost day almost all day. So you've got 19, 20 hours of daylight.
In the southern hemisphere? What flat earther made that claim? It looks like, I don't know what Flat Earth Dave is doing here. I guess maybe he's just sick and tired of arguing with this goof who's got nothing but fallacies, but I haven't heard that claim. I've heard the opposite claim. Some flat earthers say that there is no 24-hour sun in Antarctica, but I mean, let's continue here anyway.
So you've got this sun that's traveling around way out towards the edge, because this is how you like to do it. And it is somehow illuminating almost all of the outer regions of your pizza world. And yet it is somehow not illuminating the center because areas towards the North Pole have 24 hours of night at that time. So unfortunately, you can't do the like Antarctica isn't real. So the South Pole, that's not a thing. These are places where people live.
We don't say Antarctica is not real. We don't say that at all. You say
no.
that.
You say the South Pole isn't real.
We don't.
Even though there's people who go there and work there, and
people work at the South Pole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Prove it. Okay. So
you can get a job there. Did you know that civilians can get jobs?
So the way it
works,
you
should apply for one. I think that'd be a cool video for you to do.
Dave, on your upside down world, on your ball world, in the north, Norway and northern Alaska, we have the 24-hour sun in June. Okay, and we see the sun, and it's been filmed by millions of people, and you can watch the sun circle around. Makes perfect sense on a ball. Makes perfect sense on flat Earth. We're on the same page there. But 12 months, 6 months later, at equal southern latitudes, you should see the same. But there's no video of the. No, you don't. There's no video of the 24-hour sun. There's 3 or 4 fake videos, clearly fake, taken apart. I'm talking, right? I didn't interrupt you. And there's no 24-hour sun. The sun antarcts away from you. It comes towards you and it goes away. Okay. Unlike the Arctic where it's circling around. I'm still talking. Okay. And there's no 24 hours of daylight. But if you add a dome in there, and again, we're looking at the lights in the sky, which is something that doesn't prove either. When you bring the sun closer to the dome, it wraps around. And we could show you this. get a dome, get a glass, move the light, and you'll see that the light wraps around, and that's exactly what we see in Antarctica.
Okay, so I know that you can do your fun little middle school science project where you have a little, serving tray thing and you make a flashlight do funny things, but you cannot make it actually. So this is why you have your dumb little app, your little thing in your sun and stuff. It doesn't actually show the regions of actual daylight and nighttime. It just shows like a little cartoon. You don't actually see. It doesn't actually do these patterns. So when you're called out on this, instead of going, oh, my app shows the actual patterns and this crazy arc that would make sense. So first of all, I'm sorry, even though there are videos at the South Pole, I'm sorry that Antarctica is not where a bunch of people live. So we don't have all of these videos like we do way up towards the North Pole. But again, as I said, the way southern region of Argentina, like I did in my video, Ushuaia or whatever it's called.
Which cartoon do you like the best showing Antarctica?
What do you mean, which cartoon?
Which cartoon? There's no pictures of Antarctica from space.
Okay, well, there are, so that's really dumb. But
No,
let me
there's
continue demolishing. Okay, stop. I'm going to continue demolishing the idiotic thing you just said earlier. So you can do your little thing. Flat Earthers love to do their little middle school science projects. So, okay, you've got the thing and blah, blah, blah. So why can't your Flat Earth app do it? Why can't you actually show the regions of day and night? Why can't you look at that and go, yeah, look at that. I see the light illuminating this part of the Flat Earth. Right, and I can see that we have 20 hours of sunlight in southern Argentina, and I can see that you just have a little cartoon doing nonsense, and then all of your idiot people who buy that thing, they're not like, oh, that looks cool, and they don't actually look at what it does at all, right? Why can't you have it show that, right?
It shows pretty accurately the amount of day and night, but I can't
No, it
show it.
doesn't.
Well, I can't show it because if on the latitude line that you're on. It's different where you are, so I have to kind of blend them together. It's just a tool to show
The amount of day and night depends. The amount of day and night that objectively happens in a place depends on your latitude.
Well, again, this is an issue. There's two sides on the issue here, because if your burden of proof is on positive claims, so if Professor Dave wants to claim that the continents are X distance apart, he would have to prove that, as well as anything. Now, the flat earthers would also have to prove that, but some of the flat earthers are saying that they don't know the distances because they can't verify them. So obviously that's not proof for a flat earth. But this is clearly another reductive logical fallacy and also false cause logical fallacy. I mean, there's just so many fallacies here that Professor Dave is just, I mean, this is just world record stuff here. Because if you don't know all of those parameters, how would you know exactly how many hours occurs where if you can't verify where you are in relation to a different place, which you would need to do to prove either model, of course.
Absolutely, 100% on your ball too. When I'm in the north,
I don't think you understand. I don't think you understand what I just said.
No, you don't understand what I just said.
No, I definitely know that you're not saying anything. I'm saying that in that town in Argentina, there is an objective time where the sun rises and sets.
Yes,
and where you are doesn't change that.
There's no place that you have 17 hours of sun. You have daylight. Daylight is the illumination of the sky. It's not the sun.
From the sun.
No, the sun is.
You're saying that daylight is not from the sun?
Absolutely. So if the sun
where
rises,
is it from?
If the sun
What's
rises
making the sunlight then?
No. The sun is lighting up the sky. It's like a photographer. You have your main light and then you have your backlight. The sky is the daylight. When the sun is on the east side of your house, right on the horizon, go to the back side of your house. You can read the newspaper. Well, where's that? That sunlight's not. What's it going through your house? It's lighting up the sky.
It's
and that's
scattered by atmospheric particles.
That's what
It's
you
still
say.
sunlight.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you say to say a thing that
Dave,
explains why what I just said is stupid, and I have no
come-
way to combat it.
Which is exactly what Professor Dave did this entire time.
How come nobody has filmed the 24-hour sun in Antarctica?
They have. You just say it's a lie.
Show us,
They
show us,
have, and
bring
you
it,
just go,
bring it.
oh, that's fake.
No, we don't. We don't just go, "Oh, that's fake." We
But
show
guess
you how
what?
it's fake.
That's why in my video I don't talk about Antarctica, because you just say it's fake. That's why I picked southern Argentina, because people live there and they have 19 hours of daylight, and you can't explain it because it's
I
this
did
huge.
explain it. You can't
No, you didn't.
understand
You
it.
just said there's a
Absolutely.
glass thing in the flashlight. You're just
Right.
doing a middle school science project. You're not actually explaining anything. You're just going, "Oh, I did a thing in my living room, so all of science is wrong." That's what you're doing.
And again, he's using the word science to describe his religion of scientism, because real science he would be able to clearly show why it's not XYZ and it's ABC instead. Clearly show that with controls, which he hasn't been able to support any of his positions because he doesn't understand the burden of proof logical fallacies or any of these other children's level logical fallacies. Now, Flat Earth Dave didn't do any of that either. He didn't prove his point in any way either. But the fallacy count here, there's a staggering difference. I mean, this was just clear obliteration in terms of logical debate.
You don't.
The globe. I wish I had this slide, because the
again,
globe.
Dave, the optics of the sky are no way to prove the shape of the Earth. You can.
They are.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's
I
in
just
your
did it
world.
twice.
Yeah. Well,
And you have no
keep
way to
claiming
combat
it.
anything I just said. So
Keep-
that's
keep
why
claiming
you
it.
say that thing over
Can I
and
just
over again.
interrupt here? Flat Earth Dave, what would it take? Because I think Dave is saying that, people live in Ushuaia and that they have this, and you could just go and ask the people though. You could go, what would it take to convince you, and how important is it? Why is it important to you to hold this belief? What does it mean to you?
It's not important to hold the belief. I'm looking for the truth. And if the globe was true, then when in Antarctica in December, you should be able to see the sun circle all the way around without dropping.
And you do.
You can.
Dave,
I've seen loads of documentaries where that happens.
You can't. You cannot see it. It's absolutely untrue. And we show the best one that they have. They show it 24 hours of the sun going around, and when it comes around, not only is it the same clouds, the sun is in a completely different position.
And just to reiterate, again, the burden of proof is on the positive claim. You can't just bring Bigfoot and ghost videos and expect people to believe it. Now, if they cannot provide the proof and they're just simply saying there is proof, they're on the fallacious side.
months difference position. So it's all camera trickery, and it's provable. It's not just us saying it. So when you watch,
No,
these
it
things,
is
you're like,
just
"Oh,
you saying it.
Yeah, well, not true. And do some research,
Yeah.
Dave, and then get out of your little ball model, and you'll see. We don't live upside down on a space ball flying through an infinite
Down is
space
towards
vacuum.
the center of the earth. Nobody is upside down. That's one of the dumbest things you morons say. Down is towards the center of the earth. Nobody
Yeah.
is upside
So
down.
on your world, there's people upside down relative to me.
And you're upside down relative to them. It's a sphere. Who cares?
Good luck with that.
Your response to basic shapes is good luck with that.
Yeah.
Are you 5 years old? You have the intellect of a 5-year-old.
Wow, the psychological projection of Professor Dave is really on point. I mean, this might be world record, not only most logical fallacies in the least amount of time, but most accurate psychological projection in the least amount of time.
You can't understand, like, little
Dave,
kids understand this stuff. You know
I
that?
just want to say that you're more of a condescending prick than I thought.
I wouldn't say you're more than anything I thought. I know what you are, but I'm sorry, again, to reiterate for the third time, your entire identity is based on the idea that all the scientists in the entire world
Nope.
are lying deceivers. So
absolutely not
you're
true.
a condescending
That's what
douchebag.
you say.
And me
That's what
calling
you
you
say.
stupid, which you are, does not hold a candle to
All right,
what
Sean.
you are.
That's what he claims. I don't believe that. And
Wait,
that's what
I've
what you're
got
believing.
another question for other Dave,
Oh.
Professor Dave. Just so obviously I could see. I mean, it means a lot to you as on the other side, of course. Why does it annoy you so much, the flat Earth stuff?
Because it's so, I mean, first of all, a lot of what I do, I do mainly academic tutorials, but I also address misinformation. I'm very passionate about public science literacy and science denial. And flat Earth is the bottom of the barrel. So I go after like anti-vaxxers and stuff like that. And that is a little more sophisticated. And you have to actually understand a little bit of biochemistry, a little bit of immunology and things like that. Flat Earth is the only one. I just proved the Earth is a sphere multiple times in this exchange.
So if he doesn't even understand, as he said, 5-year-old stuff, 5-year-old science, 5-year-old logical fallacies and faith are not proof. So again, he's just a leading member of the scientism cult, where he doesn't understand the difference between science and scientism. And then he gets all triggered and offended, and he has to hallucinate that anybody that doesn't keep the faith, the same faith that he does, is misinformation.
Based on looking at things in the sky and thinking. That's
Dave,
how we figured out the Earth is a sphere several thousand years ago. It's like the first thing we figured out.
Dave,
So this is why it's so offensive, because it is a denial of literally all of science. Astronomy, all wrong. Geology, all wrong. Physics, all wrong. It's so unbelievably offensive to the entire human race. That's why you're a douchebag, and me calling you stupid is nowhere near the magnitude of douchebaggery that is your entire identity.
Wow, that was a world record psychological projection rant. I mean, bravo, Professor Dave. This has to be the go-to example for psychological projection now.
You're talking to him, not me, right?
Sorry,
No.
yeah, to Davey boy over there.
So he believes that scientists that he never met 2,000 years ago proved that the Earth is a globe, when in reality, in the 1940s and 50s and up to the early 60s, they were still teaching flat Earth in public school here.
No,
Absolutely.
they weren't. That's just a thing you're saying.
That's the absolute
There's
truth.
globes from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. You can't just say that. Like, you should show me something. Show me a textbook. You can't just say, oh, this thing I made up is true. You're an idiot. What are you talking about? We've known the Ptolemaic model, which was reigned supreme from 100 or whatever, to the Copernican model, used a spherical Earth. Geocentrism used a spherical Earth. And then Copernicus and Kepler happened. And they wrote books, by the way. They wrote books, and you can read them, that they exist. And we've known about heliocentrism for 500 years since. So I don't know what you're talking about. You are completely pulling that out of your ass. Nobody taught a flat Earth anywhere for any measurable amount of time.
Can we have Dave tell us how seasons happen on the globe?
Okay, so I wish I had the graphic, because it really works really well. So there's a tilt in Earth's rotational axis, right? It's tilted like this. So one of the hemispheres is exposing more of itself to the sun, right? And so you get more direct light versus, so let's say this is the northern hemisphere, this is the southern hemisphere. More of the northern hemisphere is exposed to direct sunlight, so you have longer daylight, right? So it's so hard to just do in my hand like this.
No, I get it. I understand. You got it when we're tilted towards it, the sunlight's hitting direct, and it's more intensified here, and down here it's spread out more. Makes sense.
Yeah, because of the curvature, so it has to spread out around a greater area.
But isn't the sun so large that all of the rays leaving the sun are parallel? And why wouldn't the parallel rays that are a little off to the left, hit us direct? Are the rays leaving the sun parallel, or are they leaving not parallel?
Okay, when you have a certain, okay, here's a lateral distance. If the sun is directly hitting the part of the Earth that's directly facing it, that's a certain area. Then if you move this way, we have the same lateral distance, but there's a lot of curvature here. It's covering a greater surface area.
I have that question. So can the Earth? The Earth.
Okay. Do you want to admit that I just explained that perfectly, and that your talking point was invalid?
I know. I admit that you explained that perfectly, but I have to ask a question. So we have the pole here, and we tilt the Earth. Okay. And can you tilt the Earth this way? That's a tilt, also, right? Absolutely.
You're just turning it. What are you doing?
No. What I'm showing you is here. Here, we let's say the sun is over there, and we tilt, and we're now directly towards we have a more direct angle. We're in agreement on this. But if I'm here, and I tilt it this way, well, now the sun is lower. It's now skimming. It's now skimming, and it's not hitting as direct. So here's the problem with your seasons. In the north here, in December, when we're 3 million miles closer to the sun, but we'll just ignore that because it's not significant.
Yeah, it's not significant, so I don't know why you said it.
Well, we're 3 million miles closer. At sunrise, in December at noon, when the sun is 50 degrees in the sky, and I look at the sun, I can barely feel it on my face. I can't get a tan, right? But in June, when we're farther away from the sun, doesn't matter. And at sunrise, when the sun is literally an 89-degree tilt, the worst possible angle, as soon as it shows up on the horizon, I can feel the heat and I can get a tan. Why is that? Because in your world, it should be arctically freezing every morning all year long.
I genuinely have no idea what you're saying. You
So he couldn't even follow the basics there. I mean, a child could understand that argument. I mean, if you put, you could do this with a fire, a campfire, and you can turn your body towards the campfire, move a little closer. Obviously, it should be hotter, whether it's on your knee or your elbow, if you're closer to it. So this goof, he's either pretending he didn't understand the argument because he knows that he has no answer. He's too dumb to come up with an answer or rebuttal of any kind. So he has to pretend he didn't understand it, or he truly does have some kind of mental disability and really didn't understand that very basic argument.
throwing around 89 degree. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so you have the sun here, right? The sun, and we're tilted, so it's 34-degree tilt. Well, if I tilted it all the way down to the horizon, so I'm here.
I wonder if Sean Atwood understands the point he made, and also this Andrew guy, because they're not laughing anymore. They look kind of serious. Did they understand the point he made? And they don't have a rebuttal for it. They know that, and Professor Dave basically just threw in the towel there, admitting that he doesn't have the intellect to understand that basic point. So, I mean, what's going on here?
And the sun's over here, okay? That's an 89-degree tilt, 1 degree off the horizon, right? Any farther, it would be below the horizon. The sun
I'm
sets.
already lost. I have no idea what you're saying.
It's because you're stupid, Dave. Right?
5 minutes
No,
left,
it's
guys.
because you're not
5 minutes.
saying anything.
I will
You're just
explain
going,
it
if I
again.
tilt it
I
this
will
way, this
explain
has
it again.
nothing to do with anything.
Is that a logical fallacy? He's saying he doesn't understand anything. And Professor Dave, because you're stupid, but he did explain it. So technically, that wouldn't be a logical fallacy, I don't believe. Because if we're just using the strict definition of the word stupid, Flat Earth Dave explained this 2 times already, very clearly and succinctly. I mean, I don't know how to explain that even more even without the demonstration. I mean, does he not understand the point? If you're slightly closer to the fire, it should feel warmer. I mean, this isn't rocket science.
If the Earth is tilted 34 degrees, that's how
23 degrees, something like that.
23 degrees, whatever. If we tilted it 90 degrees, the sun would set. Well, it would set over the pole, which doesn't happen. So the farther,
5 minutes left, guys. 5 minutes left.
The farther I tilt it, the more spread out those rays are. Well, the spin is the equivalent to the tilt. So when I'm spinning away from the sun's getting lower and lower and lower. It's spreading out across the sky.
Does Professor Dave not even understand how the heliocentric model works? In terms of where the globe would be as it's rotating versus where the sun would be if it's rotating away. I mean, Professor Dave genuinely, I don't know if he's faking this level of stupid right now. He genuinely seems confused and does not seem to have the mental processing power to even understand what Flat Earth Dave is saying.
Across the world, it should get colder and colder and colder because that sun is spreading out.
Spreading across? You understand that there's always a face of the Earth. The sun is hitting half of the Earth.
Not according to time and date. All right, but that's
the sun isn't always hitting half of the Earth.
On the ball, it would be, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's
well, it does though.
So
what are you talking about,
David? You're not listening. Okay,
I am. You're just not saying anything.
So he's pretending that Flat Earth Dave didn't make an argument because he was too dumb to understand it. I mean, what would that be on the part? I mean, would that technically be a straw man and an ad hom rolled into one?
Tilt. So if we're tilted away from the sun, we have our winter. And if I tilt it farther, it gets really cold because Antarctica or the Arctic is tilted farther away. That's why it's cold in your world. Right?
But it's not. What do you mean if we tilt it further? It's not tilted further. It's a 23-degree axial tilt. So what do you mean tilted further? What are you talking about?
Why is it colder in the Arctic in the winter than it is in Florida in the winter?
I just explained it earlier.
Well, I know. Dave,
it's getting more direct sunlight.
Absolutely. So don't interrupt.
If the axis is tilted away, then it is. Dude, I just explained this. How do you not get this?
I really do wonder if Andrew gets this because Andrew and Sean. I mean, like I said, I don't know about Sean. He looks like he has a mental disability most of the time. He can't even tell what's going on, so he just laughs at stuff. But before, he looked pretty serious. Is it possible he did understand Flat Earth Dave's point, and there's no rebuttal here from these goofs?
No. You're not getting it. Listen.
Okay, you can just say that, but I actually explained it.
You're not getting this, okay?
Dave,
No,
Dave, Dave,
no,
we've
hold
run out.
on.
Dave, we've run out of time. We've run out of time.
I'm filming this.
Well,
Listen,
I'm just going to let you guys tell the viewers where they can find you and support you. So, Professor
Yeah.
Dave, we'll start
Dave,
with you.
you
Huge
don't
thank
get
you
it.
for coming on, Professor Dave.
Maybe Sean Atwood did really understand, so he had to shut this thing down quick.
Thank you.
Can you tell the viewers where they can find and support you, please?
Professor Dave explains. Oh, sorry.
FlatEarthDave.com.
So, Professor Dave, go on. And what socials are you on, Professor Dave?
Just YouTube channel, Professor Dave explains.
All right, so Professor Dave's YouTube channel link will be in the description box below this video if you want to subscribe, if you want to check his stuff out. Huge thank you for coming on. Flat Earth Dave, do you want to tell the viewers where they can find you?
You can find me at FlatEarthDave.com, but I'm thinking of making it ProfessorFlatEarthDave.com, but FlatEarthDave.com because
Isn't that cute?
We get to make up to being professors. That's always nice.
Yeah, I actually taught at an accredited university, though, so it's not
without
that
a degree,
weird.
Thank you.
without a degree,
Thank
and
you,
they
guys.
fired you.
Thank
Multiple
you, guys.
degrees. I have a master's degree.
And they fired you.
We've got another
Can I
debate.
get those bitcoins? Can I get those bitcoins?
You
We've got
improved the
another
globe.
debate. We've got another debate coming up in a
All right,
minute. So
see you
huge thank you,
guys.
guys.
Yeah.
All right, what a train wreck that was. I mean, absolute obliteration. And you know what's crazy is Flat Earth Dave completely obliterated this guy, but he didn't even really make any good arguments either, except for that last one. That was a pretty decent argument where Professor Dave either pretended to not understand it and played stupid because he had no rebuttal, or he genuinely was too mentally deficient to even understand what point Flat Earth Dave was making. Obviously, there's presuppositions there too, based on the distance of the sun. So, yeah, I mean, and also poking holes in the. I mean, this is kind of like falsification is independent of replacement and false dichotomies, because even if the globe model is false, that doesn't mean the flat Earth model is true. So, yeah, I mean, Flat Earth Dave really didn't do that good of a job. I mean, he did really poorly, but what's funny is a flat earther doing poorly still completely annihilated this goofy heliocentric globe earther who only had faith in fallacy and psychological projection, but in record numbers. I mean, look at these numbers here. I mean, this is just insane. So I hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast in this logical analysis of yet another flat earth debate. And again, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. Any theory is true or untrue. It's not about the conclusion, but this is great for educational purposes to see how fallaciously some people argue. Even if they might hold whatever model is true, if either of these models are actually true. Again, the ability to argue logically and scientifically is important. So you can't. This is again why I believe the flat Earth psyop is an actual psyop, because I mean, what are the chances that all these goofs are just arguing so poorly in defense of the heliocentric globe, almost as if by design to try to increase flat Earth membership? Again, that has nothing to do with flat Earth being true. If anybody believes I got any of the fallacies wrong here, or I missed logical fallacies, feel free to leave them in the comment section. You could also support the podcast by donating to our PayPal. Let's help logic and reason make a resurgence in a world where scientism, this religious cult, is taking over, pretending to be scientific while clearly not being. So you can donate to our PayPal to help us get more mind-shocking content out there with logic and reason at the forefront. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.